Thank you. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and learn, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people, their elders past, present and future. Now, just a few housekeeping rules, and I'll say this is a rule. Mute your mic when you're not talking. I mean, we all hear that and we all know that. But during lunch, we have 4 breakout rooms, so they're informal. You allocate yourself and you can chat on further topics. So the topics are research supervision, research groups, so that will feed in from Steve Moore's presentation. Mentoring colleagues, that's also a topic for here, and also another one for Steve Moore, the ICT field of research and the ERA codes. So, and the chairs of each session will introduce those presenters in those sessions. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Professor Steve Hall, Dean of SEP, to give the opening address. Thank you, Steve.
Marilyn, thank you. Like a German train controller, it is 9:32, I notice. So very impressed. Look, thanks to everybody for contributing to what is going to be a full-on day, I'm sure. And I appreciate the difficulties that many of you are under in the COVID situation across the country. We still somewhat have the luxury, as Lily mentioned, of coming on campus, using our offices and not having all the constraints that many of us have to work through. I would start though by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands under which we take all of the activities that Marilyn pointed out, and of course increasingly Zoom now is a reality for everyone. And we've got a full day of Zoom. I don't have PowerPoint slides to share with you, and I will be using these words in Friday's newsletter. So again, you don't have to take notes, or certainly if you go back and look at the recording of this workshop, you can skip through my words. What I hope to get out of this, of course, is a shared understanding of the research process. It is a process, and we will dip into elements of that process chain during the day. It is complex. It takes clever people and governments to make complex systems. Simple people seem to make simple systems, but that's an observation. Research is a fundamental requirement, however, of an Australian university. And this has recently been quantified so that in the future, to be a university in Australia, at least half of the areas in which you choose to teach and educate, you will be required to demonstrate that your research in half of those areas is at least at world standard. So the two now are being quantified, the quality of teaching, the quality of research, and connected in remaining a university or aspiring to become a university in Australia. And Steve Moore, Deputy Dean of Research, will later speak, of course, to the federal government audit that determines research quality. And many of my comments that follow will actually talk about the quantity of research, but we should keep the focus on quality. Firstly, research, of course, is only research if somebody knows about it. And in the university system, we can present and publish our methods and our findings, and we're audited on the quality of that. Unfortunately, industry is not so transparent. And that in itself is one of the challenges for the university system. When you try to engage with industry, they may have done it already, or they think they've done it already, or they had a look at it 20 years ago with the technology of 20 years ago and discount your approach. Don't be put off. As I said, sometimes it's a perception. They have their own priorities, their own interests, and their own self-interests. But however, remember that public disclosure of your research can prevent you from securing protection of intellectual property in the future. And another government agenda, of course, for the universities is commercialization, making money for the system and for the country from the output of research. But don't be put off what we share today. This is not public disclosure. This is an internal workshop. Like I say, my appreciation, particularly for our RHD students or potential RHD students that are participating today, a very simple message for us all, however. Research is about collaboration, but collaboration is hard. Some of the people will have heard me say that before. I make no apologies for saying it again. Research is about collaboration, but collaboration is often hard. But that hopefully is one of the outcomes of today, greater collaboration. Certainly we'll have greater internal communication, and part of the important collaboration for students is to work with their supervisory team, and of course for the supervisory team to work with students. And in the CQU distributed campus model, with pandemic restrictions on a lot of what we can do, communication and collaboration obviously is harder, as I've said, but it's the only way. Got to keep working at it. The school has a research advisory committee that I should be able to rely on for advice. It's an advisory committee. It's to advise me, actually, as dean, in the role as dean. But advice about what? The main issue, of course, is always funding. And there's never enough of it. So how we choose to spend what little we have is important, and it should be strategic. So research funding obviously is awarded to universities. How that research funding is awarded is highly complex. However, again, a simple statement. Research rarely makes money, and in fact, often costs money, in addition to what you may receive as funding. So again, careful investment of limited funds, collaboration, working together over many years is important. This is not a one-year process. PhD, 3, 4, 5, 6, and obviously if you're studying part-time, understandably longer. Shorter for a master's award, but again, the process is similar. The federal government earlier this year gave the Australian universities a one-off research bonus as part of really sugaring the pill of taking money away elsewhere, I might add. And this was calculated based upon previous year's research support program funding. So for CQU, this has provided an additional $3 million in 2021. Now, $3 million may sound like a lot of money, particularly to RHD students. However, the University of Melbourne, by comparison, received nearly $200 million. Just highlights the difference in the age of the university, the size of the university, the fact they have a medical school, intensive amounts of medical research that is well funded by government and philanthropy. But it just also highlights why CQU has to probably be even cleverer and more careful in how it spends its money. That research support program funding is a distribution of a fixed pot of money in the university system. So it doesn't just grow, it's a fixed sum of money, essentially, that the universities compete for. And it's calculated on previous year's RHD completions. 50% of the calculation is on previous year's RHD completions. Not enrollments, not commencers, but completions. So finishing the process matters. It's a long and at times hard road, but completions are important. Every completion counts, and the completion is a success and should be celebrated. The other 50% is based around research income, competitive grants, industry funding, etc. The RHD completions themselves are weighted for high cost and low cost disciplines, masters and PhD, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. I told you it was complex. And the federal government recently introduced financial incentives for RHD students to spend time with industry and in industry. Yeah, a really good initiative, but another reporting requirement and yet more bureaucracy. So I hope I've indicated that progress to completion matters. Publications tell the world of the quality of your research. And you don't have to wait until you've completed your thesis and had it examined to publish. And in fact, a very successful way of completing a thesis is to publish and include the publication within the thesis, because the publication will have been peer reviewed by external experts as part of the publication process. It makes the examination easy. It's a no-brainer. Yes, it's good research because it was published in a good journal. It was reviewed by the reviewers of that journal. You've already, in the journey, had external quality assurance of what you're doing. Successful grant applications, there will be a session on grant applications. Obviously, they help support the research. And as I've indicated, they generate funds for future research. So through careful management of this complex environment, we can drive an upward trajectory. And that's really what this is about. Hopefully staying ahead of consumer price index, wage awards, and hopefully staying ahead of our competitors, because as I indicated, it's a competitive process for funding. And I thank you for playing your part in that upward trajectory. I'm certainly going to benefit from spending time with you today, and hopefully everyone will take something out of this, this day. Thank you to the college for pulling it together. I guess I pass back to you, Marilyn, with a minute to go. Is that right?
From my records, yes. Thank you very much, Steve. Very much. And without any further ado, I'll hand over to Steve Moore, who's gone to be sort of monotoned.
Yeah, that's my it's my 1960s French film look, or dying webcam. If I bang it, it might come back temporarily, but yeah, I'll just have to be in black and white. Thanks, Marilyn, and thanks, Steve, for your comments. And also, I'd really like to thank Marilyn for pulling this all together, but also all the people that are either been volunteered or have volunteered or been volunteered to be the session chairs, because it's important for keeping this thing going. We're trying to cram a lot into one day. I had an interesting morning. One of the joys of, I've always lived in cities. One of the joys of living in the countries, woke up this morning and there was a 2-meter eastern brown snakes taken up resident on my back steps between me and my car. And being a city boy, I was a bit reluctant to step over him. So I gave him 15 minutes and eventually he slid back into a hole. But very exciting, quite an impressive looking creature. A bit scary, but okay, I'm going to share my screen. So I'm in this sort of first brief introduction. I'm going to sort of try and answer probably the big question is why do research? So I'm just going to share my screen, Marilyn. So hopefully, can you see a PowerPoint slide? Not hearing anything. Oh yeah, I'm getting the thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Okay, so why do research? It's not as stupid a question as it sounds. So I've been here a bit over 5 years. When when I was doing my interviews, Grant Stanley, who is now Vice President Research, so obviously the lead person on the executive for research in the university, wasn't too long in the job of being Pro-Vice Chancellor Research, which was under Hillary, I can't remember her last name now, the Provost, Hillary Winchester. And that was the first time the university had someone in the executive, or though it's PVCR, junior executive, representing research. And it was not even its own thing. It was under the Provost, so under academic. And so in a way, CQU has come to research, I think, or to take research sort of at the sort of top level, only in the last, well, less than a decade. So the program is relatively young compared to most universities. The focus was clearly on teaching prior to that. And this was especially so for the metro campuses, especially when they were run by the private organisation CMS, where in my discussions with some of the staff that have been around for a while in the metros, was that research was actively discouraged. So I think it's even though now it seems like all we talk about is research and the importance of research, we're still at a relatively early stage as an institution in the development. But so we have some catching up to do, but I think we are getting there. We are getting there. Okay, so why do research? Some people have actually posed this question to me when I've been sort of talking about, okay, what's sort of expected in their academic profile. So, oops, there we go. So to channel Steve Hall, so number one reason is that you're being paid for it. Most people on this Zoom meeting will be in the teaching and research category, which is balanced, or formerly was called balanced. And there's an expectation of a 35% research component in that job position. SET is very heavily skewed towards this balanced category, or teaching and research category. It's the default position that PAC assigns for every new hire. We do have teaching intensives and teaching scholars, probably more in College of ICT than in engineering. But even if you look at those, even a teaching scholar is expected, well, we call it scholarship, but scholarship is really just research into the education space. It's 25% as opposed to 35%. But bottom line is, if you're especially in the teaching research category, there's an expectation that a little bit more than a third of your time is spent in research. And I know that with teaching loads during the teaching terms, that can be very tough. A lot of people do find the time and do it throughout the year, but most people don't. We have a 2 teaching term limit, so everyone gets, well, almost everyone gets a free term, and that free term is essentially is available to do research full time if you have the advantage of not having any teaching at all during that period. So the other thing is, in the enterprise bargaining agreement, there's an appendix that outlines the targets for research output. I'm not aware of that, like the EBA is currently being renegotiated for the agreement that's going to replace the current one. I haven't heard anything about these targets being renegotiated. So as far as I'm aware, unless there's some secret negotiations going on, these are probably going to be very similar in the next EBA. They're different for different disciplines, but just looking, actually, if you look down here, this is so it's mandated a number of papers and also an external funding amount. So for level B in ICT, they're expecting on average, say 2.3 papers, 3 papers at level C, 4.36 at D and 6.7 at E. These numbers were developed by the Vice President Research based on ERA data in the various disciplines, and it was agreed to by the NTEU. Important thing to note is that from year to year, you know, I'm not a big fan of having hard numerical targets, quantity targets for papers on a year-to-year basis, because some years, you know, you'll do an experiment or do a study that might last a couple of years, and then you'll have 3 papers come out all at once, whereas one year you might have no papers come out because, you know, you always have to do some research to have something to write about. So the way we're looking at it is over a 3-year window. So when we assess someone's research output, we're looking at over the past 3 years, how are they traveling in terms of the number of papers. External income's tough. We have the school's research income is largely generated by the centres and a few key senior researchers in the centres. A lot of people in the ECR and MCR, the early and mid-career categories, and so they're the people that I've been trying to support and to sort of break into that external income area. Down here in the bottom left corner, I've just got the average over the period from 2016 to 2020, a 5-year period, just looking at the average number of papers by academic profile level, B, C, D, and E in this college, ICT, so for members of this college. And I mean, not too bad. I mean, level B is 1.4, it should be, you know, essentially 2.4. So a bit over half. C is 2.25, and the target is 3. So not that far off, but a little bit low. Ds and Es are doing fine, but I should point out that there's very few Ds and Es that are research active. So, you know, this more like level E essentially reflects Rajesh and William, for example. So you know, as you would expect, that someone at that level and their research intensive should definitely be hitting those targets. Obviously, if you get into the research focus and research intensive, these numbers go up because you're devoting more of your time to research. Okay, so number 1 is where, you know, it's part of your job description. Number 2 is promotions. You know, we're in a promotions round, or we just had a promotions round now. Congratulations, we did very well, I thought, in the promotions. A lot of people got promoted. I know, I'm pretty sure Santoso did, Ritesh. Marilyn, you probably have a better idea. Maybe we should do a shout out at some point to all the people. I should have that. I don't have the email open in front of me. But if you want to get promoted, and I'm pretty sure everyone does, and especially if you're in the teaching and research, the balanced category, which most of you are, you really need to be hitting those targets, being very close. This is just taken out of the promotions profile, but out of the, I think, was there 8 criteria that they look at, 3 of them are research related. I'm including scholarship as being part of that too, because essentially I think we may as well extend the discussion. Just because someone's a teaching scholar, they shouldn't just switch off, because they are research active in that scholarship space. But the Vice President Research is on these promotions panels, and I know that he looks very closely at research outputs. So it's not only the papers, but, you know, even the soft things like who you're collaborating with. Do you have collaborations with people from other institutions, other countries, etc.? And looking at, after someone applies for promotion, the 3 things that they look at, and they get reports, and these are reports from the university system, so not just self-reporting. There's been I have heard of a few unhappy customers that went into promotion rounds feeling pretty confident about what they were doing, but then were dinged because there wasn't really any documentary proof to back up all the claims they were making about, oh, I'm involved in this and I'm involved in that. So you really have to make sure that what you're doing is being logged and recognised by the university. So publications, grants, and RHD supervision, they're the things they're going to look at. And a list of your publications over the last 5 years. This is really important. you'll always be getting emails from Rochelle Cole and the research division about research elements. Go check your research. Everyone has a research elements profile. This is the system the university uses to capture all the publications. I have to say, it is really not a good system. I really cannot understand why it can't just be like Scopus or Google Scholar and automatically just find you papers. Why? You have to train it. So if you haven't done it, go in. There's a bit of a learning curve. It'll throw up a million papers saying, are these yours? Weed out all the ones that aren't. And then once you have that sort of set up, it's pretty good. But it just seems strange to me. We're paying a lot of money for a system that doesn't work as well as free systems. But anyway, it is what it is. But so just one takeaway here. If you've never opened up your research elements, please go do it. Because if you're not monitoring that, if you haven't set the filters correctly so it knows who you are and how to find your papers, you could have a nasty surprise if you ever want some official recognition of your publication record, and definitely for promotion. Third reason, it's important for the school and our discipline within the school. Like Steve mentioned, the new era. The era has suddenly become a lot more important, more than just bragging rights. It's now directly linked to university status, which I'm going to talk about more in the next talk about era. ACS, the ACS accreditation, I spoke to them. They were clearly very interested in research, and obviously they're probably more, the focus is more on accrediting the teaching of the discipline, but research is seen as an essential component of that, and especially in a fast-moving field like ICT, you need to be sort of at the cutting edge to have that feedback into the teaching operations. So ACS, to me, made it pretty clear that, and they asked a lot of questions, and were very interested in sort of getting into all facets of the research operation. And as Steve mentioned, and I've mentioned, and I will be talking about in more detail, the Excellence in Research for Australia, the ERA ranking in ICT is important if we want to maintain teaching operations. In the very near future, we're going to have to demonstrate competence in our research ranking by the Australian government needs to be at a level that is considered at world standards. So I'll be talking a lot more about that later. So it's, as a group, it's important for the College of ICT, and also for the school and ultimately the university. Just to show you here, so here's in the old coding scheme at the 2-digit level. So 2015, we were below world standard, and then we've got in 2018, we've gone up to at world standard. So moving forward, that is the bare minimum that we need to maintain in ICT. So there's room we need to go up. If we go backwards, it's very bad. And then at the 4-digit level, which is where you drop down into the more specific categorizations, also a 3. So we're at world standard at the 2- and 4-digit level. But I should point out that most of this is representing the activity in the Centre for Intelligent Systems. And finally, I've already mentioned it, so I won't spend long on this slide. University status is linked. So by 2030, at least half of the broad sort of 2-digit codes that we're talking about, we need to be hitting the at world standard or above. And finally, the research accounts for almost 40% of the Times higher education university ranking, and CQU and most Australian universities, I think the THE ranking is the one that they take the most notice of, and that is actually worked into, at the executive level, it is worked into KPIs around ranking, and particular Times higher ranking, and fed by Scopus data. So in 2017, so the previous Vice Chancellor, I heard him say it many times, he didn't give a stuff about university rankings. They were meaningless, didn't mean a thing. 2017, suddenly we were in the 400s, so university rankings were the bee's knees. It was really important for the university. But unfortunately, since then, we've slipped quite considerably. And a lot of that is due to citations. I can't remember what this number, the metric actually means, but low is bad. So our number of citations we're getting has dropped precipitously. So, and that's normally a reflection of journal quality. I mean, it's a very complicated thing to derive, but at the bottom of it, if the better the overall quality of the journals and the papers, of course, the better the citation performance. So just something to keep in mind that, you know, from the individual level, like I say, it's part of your job to do research. It's also on a personal level for your own career advancement, promotions. It's important. It's important for the school, for the discipline, the College of ICT, in terms of maintaining accreditation. And also, I think research is also PR. Like when people get on the news and discuss some really interesting part of their research, people notice that and people associate that with the university. So for example, JCU, I mean, it's not their engineering program stuff isn't that great, but everyone knows about JCU because of marine science. So we don't quite have that area, but we are starting to, for example, in that sort of nexus between agriculture and ICT, we're starting to make traction. So that's another thing to think of is, you know, can we develop our own special niche where we're seen as being a groundbreaker? So I'll stop there. I think I've probably gone over by a couple of minutes. So I hand back to Marilyn, and thanks, Marilyn, and look forward to the day.
Thanks, Steve. I just had a quick look at the VC's email. In this college, the only two people who were promoted is Ritesh and Santoso.
Oh, okay.
The majority are engineering and aviation, which means next year's our year.
All right. So, well, at least I got the two right. So.
Okay, then thank you very much. Mary, can I hand over to you, please? You're the chair of the next session, Student Presentations 1 and with IBM, please.
We are starting 3 minutes late, so I may be taking that 3 minutes.
That's okay.
Okay, so the next presentation is on collaboration between academy and industry, starting with the IBM experience by Narayana Madineni and more broadly by Professor Iven Mareels. Professor Mareels has joined IBM in 2018 after 4 decades in academy, and he is also an honorary professor at the University of Melbourne and engaging in supervising PhD students. Mr. Madineni is a senior software developer and developer advocate at IBM with 14 years of global experience, and also works with the universities in his role as an academic ambassador. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Narayana.
Thank you, Mary. I hope you all can see my screen. So thank you again for inviting us to present at this symposium. I'm sure research is quite important for both academic world and the industry world as well. So in this particular talk, I would like to touch base on what IBM research is really interested in and the kind of global university programs that we have at IBM that can help with collaboration with universities. So I'll just, since we have a very brief time, so I'll just touch base on the academic initiative that we have, the guest lectures, and the Global University Awards. With respect to academic initiative, I have done a session in the past, but it's mainly for students and faculty to get access to a no-charge self-service program that will provide them with the latest technology related education, and faculty can also use this in changing their course or curriculum to better suit the trends that the industry are into. So it has got access to some commercial grade software and You also get access to enterprise quality courses and the free tier of IBM Cloud. And there are a number of IBM digital badge courses as well. And this is a URL where we can get access to it. So it's a simple registration process. Students as well as faculty can register. And then we have a big list of university guest lectures on topics that are wide enough, and you can get access. So this is both in person and remote. So it's on demand and on request. You can, if you like one of those topics, you could request for a guest lecture on those topics. And then the primary focus of my talk is about the program awards, the university program awards that IBM has. So currently we have 3 different awards. One is the PhD Fellowship Award, and then we have Master's Fellowship Award and the IBM Academic Awards. I'll probably share it directly on our website. So if we look at the page IBM Global University Programs, which is research.ibm.com/university, you have certain links like Skills Academy is a badge-based program which has training, and then the Global University Awards. Within the Global University Awards, we have like 3 different awards. And the main thing with the PhD Fellowship Award is the academic research has to align with the industry research in order for this award to be granted. And IBM is currently focused on these 6 or 7 topics, which is hybrid cloud, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cloud, open source technologies, cybersecurity, data science, and systems. So, this is quite competitive program, and a number of universities and students apply for this every year, and it's quite hard to get this. But the main focus has to be on aligning with one of these research initiatives that IBM is actively investing in. Coming to the program details, so this is like an 2-year award, the last and pre-ultimate year PhD students. In Australia, I think it's a 4-year course. So the last and the pre-last years will be awarded with this prize if they are successful. So the students have to be nominated by the doctoral faculty member, and the student has to be a full-time student in PhD program, and they have to be in the 2nd year of their program. And for the masters, Master's Fellowship Award, so it's for those who are in masters, but it's in a single 1 year only, and this is the award. And you could look at the frequently asked questions, and then this again has to be nominated by a faculty member. And then the last one is the IBM Academic Award. This is mainly for nominee must be a full-time professor at an accredited university that has a PhD or master's program. And this has to be nominated by an IBM employee. And we are fortunate to have Iven, who is an academic award recipient. So with that, I will hand it over to Iven, who can talk about research collaboration and something about the award as well. You're on mute, Iven. You are on mute.
Indeed, I was doubly muted. Honoring my name of being always muted when I come on. My apologies. Thank you, Narayana. I'll quickly maybe talk a little bit about the generic context of academe industry collaboration, and echoing a little bit of Steve Hall's first comments that collaboration is hard. And it's actually double hard when you work with industry. It's hard even within university, but with industry, it's even double hard. So let me share. And I have a little bit of experience in this space, having been an academic for a very long period of time. The companies that are on the slide here are the companies that I know best with respect to collaboration. That's IBM itself and Rubicon. And with IBM, I am part of the evaluation of the academic awards and also for the PhD awards. I have not been involved with the Master's Awards, but we have several academic awards every year in Australia, both for the PhD level and also for the academic awards. The IBM is of course a mammoth beast, so it's kind of complicated because of its structure. Working with a smaller company like I've done with Rubicon for a long time, it's an Australian-based company, also presents its challenges. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about how you overcome those challenges, because there is actually a big reward on it as well in doing that. And the reason, the main difficulty in collaboration is that we come at a table from very different cultures. On the one side, an academic culture, on the other side, a culture of an industry, where almost everything that you can think of that is associated with your career is going to be different across the divide. The way we look at rewards, the way we use even language, the way we think about time, the way we think about scale, they are very different in those organizations. And that makes it difficult because we almost speak different languages. And so there was an investment required in trying to bridge this gap. And you can't bridge the gap with almost any project, except when you can clearly identify that both parties can win. So only those projects that really have a benefit to the academic collaborator as well as to the industry collaborator, and where people are objective about it and really putting it on the table, because if you hide it, then that is not going to work for either one of you, because you will not know how to create a win-win project. The other one that is important is that it has to be almost a project that you can't do on your own, because if you can do it on your own, the effort of the collaboration is just going to be too hard and not worth the effort. It really has to be something that by collaborating, you can get something done that is beyond the means of either party. And for that understanding, again, explaining it and putting it on the table is going to be really important. The other part that we often forget is that despite the fact that we are very different, actually bringing those differences together does have one advantage. The diversity with which you can look at the same problem from different angles and from different cultures actually enriches the way you solve the problem. And typically what comes out of it is a better solution if you can bridge the gap. And one way that it is expressed is, Steven alerted a little bit to it, publications that cross that boundary between academic and industry research. And those publications actually have a much higher citation impact than either academic papers alone or industry papers alone, because it brings these differences of culture to the table, and many more people are attracted to those papers. And typically in our own experience, if we publish something with IBM research alone, we have X as our citation impact, and typically 2X, sometimes 3X with respect to when we collaborate with other parties. And similarly for the University of Melbourne, I know that the citation impact was roughly 1.9 times, and that's across all of engineering and IT, was about twice as large when we collaborated compared to when we worked on our own, or when we worked with other academic collaboration. So when the monoculture approach was roughly half the effectiveness of the citation impact compared to when we crossed the bridge. Now, in order to work this, and this comes out of experience, in order to be able to work the two cultures, you need champions on both sides. And with champions, I mean people that can remove obstacles, because you're going to get obstacles that can't be done in my culture. Well, then someone has to say, well, it can, and here is a way to do it. You need those champions on both sides. The other thing that is really important, and especially with working with industry, is that even if there is no progress, it's still an important message to deliver. And it's very important to explain why there is no progress. And it can be for many reasons, but the most important thing is there are never surprises for management. Because if there are surprises for management, it's normally enough to say, too difficult to work with, and we stop working. Given that cultures in any party depends on people, and people change, for the longevity of a project, it's really important that you work at different levels. You can work at the project level, but you also have to make sure that your management level is in the loop. And if you possibly can, my preference is that you also have a touch point with people that are informed and live that strategy. That way you have longevity. At the project level, people can change. If the management knows about the project and it's important, they will find replacements and the project can continue even though people change. And people change in jobs, they promote, and often when they promote in industry, they don't stay on with the project because their task is now one of supervision rather than of execution. And suddenly you lose your biggest collaborator. So the only way to overcome that is that you have also kept their management informed, and they say, oh, that's an important project, I better find another execution person at the project level. If you have these things, you have your champions, and you have no surprises, and you keep your communication channels open at all levels, then I can just say the rest is a lot of hard work, like you heard already, but it's also fun because you can do things that you otherwise can't do. And just to show a bit about the win-win objectives, there are four quadrants in research, essentially, that you can find in this book about the Pasteur quadrant. And if you look at practice and theory, in an academic-only environment, you can do this basic research, the Niels Bohr type research, the Niels Bohr quadrant. That's not a place where you're normally going to have a lot of success with industry because it's too far out before it can actually be seen to make impact. A good example, when Einstein invented the photovoltaic effects, 1905, there was nobody in industry even interested. 100 years later, it's a very interesting project and everybody wants to know and how to make it better. Then it becomes a much more use-inspired theoretical work, and that's what Louis Pasteur was famous for, its basic research, but use-inspired. So the link between the two cultures is there. And if you can be in that space, then you really, you can make a lot of progress. In industry, you also find a lot of just hard grunt work to make some things work. And Edison, with all his inventions, is a very good example of that type of research. That's, again, not a place where you find a lot of good collaboration. So it's really in this Pasteur quadrant where you'll find that basic research and use-inspired research have a match, and where you can get good win-win solutions and where you can make a big difference. So how do you value this collaboration, right? So money is important. I know this is important for universities, but it's also about the way you can make impact and the way you can evaluate new ideas and the way you can look at new ways of working. And that requires an open mindset. Industry approaches research in a different method often than academia, but not without importance. And companies like IBM invest about 10% of their company in research every year. And our research goes from all the way fundamental research that is published in Nature, all the way to having a lot of open source, like 80% of our software actually we produce in open source environments. And then we also patent a lot. Narayana, for example, is a master inventor. He has acquired a few patents, and we have a lot of people that are in that space. And in my team, I have a number of master inventors with hundreds of patents. But we always, when we collaborate, we will make sure that you are also on the patent, because it's a legal requirement of patents that all the inventors are on the table as part of the patent. And as IBM collaborator, you have exactly the same rights as an IBM person to get patenting and patenting support. So if you want to have a quick patent win, IBM has a machine that does patenting extremely well, much better than I've seen in any university before. From a research partner, successful collaboration definitely helps, and it gives you that impact and reputational leverage. that you can't underestimate. And for industry partners, it also builds reputation, because having your problem looked at through different eyes and seen in a bigger context really brings a lot of value to the market. So you can't underestimate what you as an academic actually contribute to a particular project in industry through this critical thinking that you bring to the table. A social license to operate, for example, is often able to be derived from having had critical, academic, independent people who are not beholden to the shareholders of the company to be able to critically evaluate it. And industry values that enormously. And finally, the one that I can't overestimate enough is the diversity. Diversity of approaches, diversity of way of thinking, bringing teams of different skills together. Industry thrives on that, because problems are never posed in IT problems or engineering problems or legal problems. They're just problems. And we need to bring all the skills that we can bring to the table to be able to find a good solution that is workable within a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time. That's our constraints environment. But diversity always generates better solutions. Monocultures normally don't work. And certainly now in design and an IT environment where everything is so much focused on personalization, diversity makes a great difference. And with that, I think, I would say, go for the Pasteur quadrant. Put a lot of hard work behind it. You're going to find it's fun. And maybe just a reminder that if industry people complain or academic people complain, remember this. I forget who said it, but there is nothing as practical as a good theory, and there are no practical problems that can't do without more theory. So there is a lot to be said to have collaboration across industry, academia, cultural divide. Thank you for your attention. We're back on track, Marilyn, I believe, so we have some time for questions.
Yes.
Yes, we do. Thanks, Mary.
One question I have is, when you are talking about this PhD fellowship and master's fellowship, are these available to international students, or the students should be Australian residents?
No, they are available to anybody. We don't care. As long as they are registered students of a university, anybody can receive these awards. Local as well as international students. The competition is hard, though. I think there is about 10 times more applications for the number of scholarships that are available. And the most important thing there is to have alignment. So it always pays to have a good look at people's interests, who in a particular, like if it's blockchain, who works on blockchain in IBM research, what do they do, what are their interests, do I have something to bring, that point of view that is differentiating. They're the type of things that make the difference. But they are available to everybody, there are no restrictions. IBM does work in 176 countries, so any nationality, maybe not North Korean, but any nationality is fine.
Thank you. And are there any exemplars we can look at, any previous applications there which are successful ones?
I would have liked to say yes, but unfortunately the process has changed significantly. So actually this new process in the new website that Narayana has shown us, I think that is—
It shows the recipients, it shows the names of the recipients, but not the projects. Probably you might have to—
Yeah, so, but it is also changed quite dramatically. So the evaluation process has changed, the award mechanism has changed. So I will have to have a look to see whether I can find anything that— I know one that we submitted last year, and I probably can redact the institution and the people that were involved to give you a bit of an idea of what it looks like. It isn't overly long or cumbersome. It's the main thing is this alignment. And if that can be addressed, then you're normally okay. There's a whole website, right, for filling in information, Nahina, about it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. we still have more time for questions.
Ivan, you spoke about your need for champions to have that industry collaboration. We've got a lot of early career researchers and mid-career researchers. Do you think they can be the champions? Or if not, what should they do to get champions on board?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Stephen. So it's often difficult for them, because if there is a problem inside the organization, then they may not have the clout in order to be able to push it through. So I would say people that are understanding the processes within the university are important on the university side. Similarly, in the industry, if you have a junior engineer to work and collaborate with, make sure that the junior engineer has talked to its management and that they are also involved and have regular contact. Management always loves those, so there's never a problem with that. But not having recruited these people early on in the piece can cause difficulties, because someone may have a pet project and then the management said, but hey, wait a minute, what are you doing that for? And then suddenly your project disappears, which is really a painful experience on the academic side, because you've invested in all of this and nothing comes of it. So early on, I would say I would have a mentor professor inside the faculty that has been there and done that. And that's a very good use of mentorship, basically. And similarly, within the industry, I would make sure that my industry collaborator either has direct management or a mentor inside the company at a higher level than himself that is going to be aware of the project and endorses the project. It's no use to have management that says, oh, and is lukewarm about it. It's better to have buy-in. And so that requires a bit of work up front. Avoiding to do that work up front normally causes grief later on. It's better to invest a little bit extra time. And I know this can take time in industry as well. They're not fast in moving these, and the meetings can change sometimes without priority, but just persist, I would say, to have those meetings. And then once those meetings have had, there comes a regime afterwards that is relatively simple and it's part of the entire schema, and things work. But yeah, I would say go and search them out, professor internally, management externally.
Any more questions? Any more questions? We still have time, 2 more minutes. Okay, thank you very much, Narayana and Iven. So
you're welcome,
it was
Mary.
Really very, very good for
Thanks for having us.
Here. Okay.
Thank you for having us, and happy to follow up also with questions. I'm easy to find an email.
Okay. Yes, you have been very prompt. I was surprised.
My pleasure. Thank you. Enjoy the day. It's an important topic you're all working through, and yeah, I have my own ideas about ERA and everything else, but research helps in many ways. The accounting of it, I don't know. It's a necessary evil, but enjoy the day. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are well in time, so there is no worries. So our next presenters there are 4 research higher degree students. The first presenter is Gitte Galea. The research topic is exploring the adoption and use of social media by Queensland Health, challenges and pitfalls. Supervisor is Associate Professor Ritesh Chak. Over to you, Gitte.
Thank you very much, Mary. So today what I'll be presenting is essentially my draft 3MT. It's not quite prepared for this audience, so just bear that in mind. It's essentially the elevator pitch to a lay person about the research that I'm doing. But I will stop and talk to a slide specifically for this group here about what's going on in my research.
Sorry, Gitte, there appears to be some problem with your audio, so I'm not sure if it's only me or the others as well.
Oh, thank you, Ritesh. Is it still bubbly?
Yeah, same with others.
Okay,
Yeah.
probably the best thing is that I stop sharing, I go out and I come back in, and then, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with the laptop. That's the only way I can fix it. So I'll be back in a minute.
I might add, I factored in here a minute or two for technical problems, so thank you.
Mary, if you like, we could probably start with the next presenter just to save some time.
We'll give 30 seconds for Gitte to come back, and anyway, she started, so yeah, we are in time, don't worry. We'll take 2 minutes from the coffee time.
Is that better?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, can you see the screen and you can hear me okay? Okay, cool. I can get started. Okay, so why should we care about social media in health organisations? Consider your own experiences with social media and health. In the past 18 months in particular, how have you acquired health information? Perhaps it's been COVID related or other health matters. Just consider your own experiences. What do you think are the benefits and drawbacks of this largely unrealised technology? Oops, wrong slide. Sorry, technical difficulties. My research is about exploring what works and what doesn't work in the use of social media in health organisations by looking at one of the largest health organisations in Australia, Queensland Health. So picture Queensland divided into 16 different areas. I'm interviewing social media administrators from each area to see how they use social media, each with their own communities, different cultures and different needs. What works for one area doesn't necessarily work for another. So at this point, this is where I'm going to deviate from the 3MT and just talk to this audience a little bit more about what's happening in my research and some of the challenges. For this project, getting approval to the interview is a challenge. So after working through a lengthy ethics application to work with Queensland Health and getting approval within 2 weeks, which was amazing, my journey to get site-specific approval started in February. So each hospital and health service is essentially dealing with a separate government department. They each have their own processes, their own ways of working. It is not a one-size-fits-all. They don't have the same process for each hospital and health service. So trying to navigate through how each one operates is a challenge. And it's an enormous paper trail. I have an enormous spreadsheet where I keep tally of who I've talked to, at what stage is my application up to. Getting the letter of support has been the biggest challenge. I don't have contacts inside of Queensland Health, although I am starting to build that, and I need to probably leverage on that a bit more now. Asking someone to give up their time in the current state. They are social media administrators for Queensland Health in the current COVID climate. So some of the responses I'm getting are that they're too busy. So this slide represents, this is where I'm at. And it's an enormous journey, but after my first interview, I would have to say it's all worth it. It all comes together. So back to the 3MT. This is my 3MT slide, and this slide is a representation of the human being behind the social media technology. So I'm currently listening to their stories about how they use social media in their role with Queensland Health. They are incredibly passionate about their work, often working early in the morning until late at night, monitoring and working with social media. I was also fortunate enough to interview a pioneer who was actually part of the introduction of social media with Queensland Health. Her stories were amazing. So in order to understand how social media is being used in Queensland Health, who better to ask than the social media administrators themselves? They are the people that are going to answer my research question. So my approach is storytelling, and storytelling is one of the oldest ways of transferring knowledge. And I believe this research approach is far-reaching in studying the use of emerging technologies. The stories of the people working in the heart of it all give voice and meaning to the work that they do, and allows me as a researcher to capture that knowledge. Once I've completed my interviews, I get to immerse myself again in their stories through analysis, looking deeply for those interesting themes that will answer my research question. This is an exploratory study to determine what factors contribute to the effective use of social media for Queensland health. So an outcome to answering my research question is to develop best practices and guiding principles for health organisations to use social media effectively. So the outcome will benefit Queensland Health, Australian health organisations, and potentially the world, offering a unique perspective to all other researchers. So social media is considered by some researchers to be a poison challenge, but it is definitely one we cannot ignore. Thank you. Any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Thank you, Lily.
Yes, project looks great. And I was wondering, how do you conduct your interview? Do you go to an online survey or Zoom meeting or face-to-face, etc.?
Great question, Lily. They're semi-structured interviews. Essentially, I have 4 main questions. So I've got the main overarching research question, broken it down into 4 main questions, and then I also have some prompts. But the interview is semi-structured, it's fairly organic. It's having to read the person that I'm talking to, of what they like to talk to, in encouraging in non-verbal cues. I use a lot of to show that I value what they're saying, and asking those more prompting, tell me more questions about the things that I'm looking for, so that we go a little bit deeper.
Okay, but as a person who come to your interview, do they need a permission from their boss, or do you have to have some approval about that?
Yes, well, that's the 16 site-specific assessments I have to work through. There has to be a letter of support or email of support from a head of department, and where it gets challenging is in the smaller areas where they have dual hats on, they perform dual roles. But there is that line manager approval, and then contacting the person who does the actual social media posting. So not necessarily the manager, but in the smaller areas, sometimes it is the manager. So get that crossover, having to work through any conflicts of interest, making sure the line manager is approved, and then we've got the right contact. Does that answer your question, Lily?
Yes, good. Thank you.
I think we can continue this discussion during the breakout time.
Okay.
We can go ahead to the next presenter. Our next presenter is Stephen Holliday. Research topic is performance-based funding in higher education. So supervisors are Associate Professors Ergen Guide and Julie Fleming. Over to you, Stephen.
Great, thank you, Mary. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. It's good to see everyone here. It's great to be in this symposium today. Just bear with me for 1 second. All right. Okay. Can you see that now? Can everyone see that?
Yes, thanks.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay, my topic is a study on Australian performance-based funding for domestic bachelor level students, undergraduate students. This is a little bit outside of the ICT. It's mainly part of my connection with Sydney, because I'm based in Sydney, and Professor Ergen Guide, who's my principal supervisor. So I hope you find it interesting. I'm going to do a flyover of my research to date and what I'm trying to do, and the importance of this research, which is quite topical at the moment. So performance-based funding aims to improve learning and teaching and graduate outcomes through financial incentives. There's a quote there from the government from 2018, where they sort of echo that idea as well, that it's intended to ensure universities focus sufficient attention on the quality of their teaching and student support to ultimately achieve best possible graduate outcomes. Now, as you would know, Commonwealth supported places at the moment are funded through the number of students that are enrolled, until it's capped in 2018, of course. The more students you enroll, the more funding that the university receives for undergraduate places. This is a change to make a proportion of that funding based on performance-based measures. So it's a radical idea. It was discussed back in the Bradley Review in 2008. But the idea is that instead of 100% being based on how many students enroll, other criteria is used. Now, while most funding models have extensive consultation with students and staff, this was not the case with this model. With the performance-based funding, the consultation period was based on a very short window of a month and a half over the Christmas break, and focused on high-level people in institutions. So I'm interested to find out the views of students and staff as to what they think should be included in such models, because this will reflect what they think is important. So the aim of this research is to enhance the policy debate on the development of performance-based funding for bachelor degree courses and so forth. And the primary stakeholders in focus in this research is students and staff. Now, this is particularly topical at the moment because the model they proposed for 2020 has been deferred till 2024. So this makes this research, which I expect to finish to submit in March, quite topical, and hopefully it may get some attention, and it may form part of the process that's involved in making such models more efficient and more accepted in the community with some research of these stakeholders. And I've covered that research significance. Okay, so the research approach I took was based on grounded theory, and I'm using mixed methodology in a sequential manner, which I'll explain the rationale for. The aim of this approach was to get a deeper understanding of performance-based models than you might get with only one of those models alone. So basically there's two stages: the qualitative stage, which involved semi-structured interviews with high-level university staff. That stage has been completed. Got some marvelous feedback from these people, people with a lot of experience in the sector, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of ideas. Some of them hated performance-based funding, I must admit, probably about 50-50. But what I was asking them for in that case was, okay, given that even if you don't like it, what would you, if you had to have a model, what would you include? And I've got some marvelous feedback, which I was able to use for the second stage, which is a quantitative stage, which involves a survey of students and staff to explore their views on appropriate measurement areas. So some of the things you might want to measure performance on is things like graduate outcomes, student satisfaction, completion rates, success rates, and those sort of things, rather than enrolments. And the idea is that if money is attached to that, then there's a strong incentive for universities to meet various targets and to raise their performance in the sector. Now, the survey is being prepared in plain English, non-financial language, and it has a focus on learning and teaching and graduate outcomes, and not money. I'm trying to make it not about that, because I want to know what sort of things do they want to be driven by such a model. Okay, so just briefly, why did I use grounded theory? Now, this study seeks to discover the opinions of students and staff, and this is to be tethered at a point in time. grounding theory looks at, doesn't have a predetermined priori. So it's looking at what arises from the data and we'll make conclusions on that basis. So that's important. The information will be tethered at a point in time. And this is an important epistemological consideration, which is hard to say. All right, so where am I up to so far? So far, I've published 2 peer-reviewed articles and did an external conference presentation. I've had 5 citations on these so far and 447 reads to date, as of today. I've completed the first stage interviews, ethics approved, of course, and had some excellent training from Madeline Behrman. Highly recommended. It was very good. Now I've completed those and the analysis of stage 1. I've received ethics approval for the second stage 2 survey. I've done my initial chapters and so forth as far as I can go. And I'm currently in the survey rollout and data collection phase. And I'm expecting to submit around March 2022. And there's my references there. So that was a very quick overview. I'd appreciate any questions that you have, because I think this is an important topic for the sector, and hopefully it may even give the university a little bit of profile if it's used in the outcomes for 2024. And I'll stop sharing at this point.
Any questions for Steven? Just one question.
Yes, I do have a question. Can you tell us why you chose to do the qualitative stage first, followed by the quantitative, rather? Because I'm used to doing it the reverse.
Very good question. Other people have asked that as well. Now, the idea was to build off the expert opinions to provide more information and insight into the preparation of the survey. Particularly as I'm surveying students and staff, some of their opinions were able to guide me. And in fact, they came up with additional ideas which I've included, which were not in the literature review. They had some excellent ideas. So that's why I did it that way, to get that expert opinion along with the literature review to form the survey.
Thanks, Steven. That does make sense.
I'm glad.
Okay. Our next presenter is Lakshmi Sujatha Grandhi. Research topic, a trust-based model for the adoption of financial technologies. A comparative study of Indian and Australian financial institution. Supervisors are Associate Professors Santoso Wibowo and Marilyn Wells. Over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Mary. I'm presenting my screen. Every day, we deal with many financial transactions, such as credit card payments, withdrawing money from ATM machines, and doing online shopping. All these transactions are facilitated by none other than financial technologies, that is fintech. Also, trust plays an important role in dealing with these financial transactions. So, my research mainly pinpoints the factors that are associated with the trust and fintech adoption intention. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lakshmi Sujatha Grandhi, and I'm a PhD student. The title of my project is A Trust-Based Model for the Adoption of Financial Technologies, a comparative study of Indian and Australian financial institutions. And my supervisors are Dr. Wibowo and Associate Professor Marilyn Wells. What is fintech? They are innovative technologies adopted by the financial institutions for delivering financial services, transform the traditional methods of delivering financial services to the customers. Some of the fintech services examples include online money transfer, payments, budgeting, financial planning, savings, and so on. If you look at the statistics, by the end of 2016, the number of fintech companies increased to 2,000, and the investments in these firms also crossed more than $20 billion US. Research significance. As you all aware, this is the 6th lockdown in Melbourne. Due to the recent COVID pandemic, both consumers and financial institutions are favoring towards these digital transactions. To reduce human interaction, financial institutions are attempting to provide more services through digital channels. As a result, a further growth in fintech adoption rates is expected to continue for some time. There are several organizations still exploring ways to adopt fintech and offer online services such as mobile wallets, loans, insurance, and financial planning. Although India is a developing country and Australia is a developed country, India ranked second and Australia ranked 20th for fintech adoption rates with 87% and 58% rates respectively. By comparing, Australian and Indian contexts will help understand the reasons behind poor fintech adoption rates in developed economies. Although there are several financial institutions in India, India has predominantly been a cash-based economy. This is due to the inaccessibility of financial services by the rural population. With financial technologies, Indian financial institutions can also offer a range of financial services, not only to the metropolitan population, but also to the rural population. My research aim is mainly to identify challenges that are associated with fintech adoption by Australian and Indian financial institutions, and also investigate the role of trust in conjunction with technology, organization, environment, and socio-cultural factors in enabling trust in fintech adoption intention. I have done literature review and looked at several technology adoption models, diffusion of innovation, theory of planned behavior, and so on. Based on the empirical evidence, I have combined two models, that is Technology Organization Environment Model, TOE, and TAM, Technology Acceptance Model. I have also looked at institution-based trust and socio-cultural factors enabling trust in fintech adoption intention. I also have done hypotheses based on the previous studies, and here is my proposed research model. The research method I'm going to use in this project. This study adopts a mixed method that involving both face-to-face interviews and also online survey questionnaires. I'm hoping to collect data from both financial institutions, both in Australia and India. This study mainly uses a structural equation modeling, SEM technique, to simulate the proposed research model. The study also uses data analysis tools such as SPSS and Smart PLS. Research implications. In literature, there is no comprehensive framework for fintech adoption. So mine will be the first one. So as I mentioned, this study presents a comprehensive framework to understand the impact of both human and non-human factors in technology adoption. The study also is expected to be a part of the first few studies in the area of financial technology adoption. The study mainly contributes to the finance sector, and the results can be used by financial institutions both in Australia and India to address the key issues that are acting as barriers for fintech adoption. The study results can be used by policymakers and academics to formulate appropriate policies to encourage fintech adoption. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
You're well in time, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Lakshmi? It's very interesting research.
I've got a question for Lakshmi. Like Lakshmi, in your presentation, I've seen that you have 19 hypotheses. So
yeah,
can you tell me about your hypothesis for your research?
Well, if you look at,
actually 20 hypotheses.
Yes, yeah. Yes, I have, as I mentioned earlier, that I have combined two models, and then I have identified various key factors that are associated with the trust. And then I have developed hypotheses based on the factors: vendor-specific guarantee, technical protection, perceived legal protection, and all enabling trust in fintech adoption intention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Yeah, Mary, I have one question. So regarding the trust, so can you give me the example how you are going to measure the trust for this modeling and this data analysis? So trust, how are you going to measure the trust? So there's a dependent and independent variable. So definitely you have some items in the trust. So how are you going to, can you give the example how you're going to measure the trust?
Yeah, I'm going to test my hypothesis with the with the SEM technique so that I can run so what I have done. So I'm going to simulate that technique in that model.
My question is, how are you going to measure the trust? So
since I have combined two models and then I have identified various key factors, so I'll enable that trust in that fintech adoption intention.
Okay, I think probably you need to discuss more. You can do that during the breakout time. So thank you, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
Our next. Can you stop the person? Can you stop the slide share, Lakshmi? Okay, thank you. Our next presenter is, and this is the last presentation of the session, Topun, research topic, computer visualization for microscopic discern and count of plant parasitic nematodes. Supervisor is Arjun Nepion. Over to you, Top. There. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Good morning, all. I'm Top Bahadurpun, currently studying Master of Research. My research topic is computer visualization for microscopic discerns and count plant parasitic nematodes. Supervisors is Arjun Nepion and Issar. This is my presentation outline. I'm going to show some of my research work today. Start with the introductions, research questions, and then objectives. We'll talk research methods, result, and conclusions. Introductions. Nematodes are one of the most abundant multicellular microorganisms with half to 1 million species in the nature. Among them, 4,100 identified as plant parasitic nematodes, and root knot nematodes are economically important plant parasitic nematodes and major limiting factors on broad acres, crop, and vegetable. Figure 1 shows nematodes. So why plant parasitic nematodes need to be identified and enumeration? This is because of economic impacts on agricultural products. Plant parasitic nematodes cause 78 billion annual crop loss worldwide. Yield losses of 50 to 80% by root knot nematodes in vegetables. In Australia, 5 to 20% yield loss per year, worth 80 millions by plant parasitic nematode. My research objective is to develop a method to discern and count root knot nematode using computer vision and develop a deep learning model for nematode detection. The figure shows arcane detection framework using computer vision. First, we prepare the samples, then collect it, we process that samples, we acquire the image of that samples, process the image, and we measure the objects, identify the and detects the nematodes, and we quantify it. First, a sample preparation and collections. Tomato plants were grown into greenhouse. After that, arcane extracted after 10 weeks. For sample processing, whitehead nematode extraction method will be used. For sample imaging, BX53 microscopes with 4x objective lens and attached digital camera implemented. Cell sense software used to capture the image and measure the dimension manually. This is my algorithm that I have implemented to detect the nematodes. First, we load the image, then apply Gaussian filter to remove noise. We convert RGB image to gray image, then we segment that image using triangular thresholdings. And then we remove the small objects, then apply morphological closing to ensure that there is no any missing edges. Then only we can fill the holes of the objects and find all the contours in the image. The contours is just a close boundary along the objects. For each contour, we check the contour area, that whether it is within the range of minimum and maximum area that we calculated manually. If it is so, then we create a max of each contours. We compute the width, length ratio, and then again, we check the ratio. If it is within the manually computed ratio, then contour is RKNs. We save the measurements, we create the max of the image. Otherwise, the contour is dust particles. Finally, we save the image. RKN, root node nematode length and width computations. Length of RKN computed in 3 approaches: contour perimeters, contour thin structures, graph skeleton structures, and width of RKN calculated using medial axis average width. This is the sample image. This is the output image after RKN detection. Now the results, it is the length comparisons, that is manually calculated length, and then we compared with the machine calculated lengths. The results showed that contour arc length has the highest correlations with adjusted R square 0.895 and false detection is 3. And skeleton graph structures, all of them have almost similar correlations, but false detections is better in skeleton graph structure. The algorithm further tested on 519 images consisting 1769 RKNs. Then we again compare the count comparisons, the manual count and automated counting. The results showed that skeleton graph structures has less false detections and missed RKN compared to contour arc length and thin contour structures. Finally, the conclusions. The results showed that contour arc length reveal the highest correlations and lowest with the thin structures. False detections and missed RKN is less on skeleton graph computations, highest in thin structure. This study showed that skeleton graph structure is appropriate in terms of length, computations, and false detections. The presented technique can be implemented in detecting other nematodes. These are the reference. Thank you for your time. For any feedbacks and questions.
You finished well in time, Top. Any questions for Top? Can you stop the sharing? Any questions? Another very good topic.
Thanks, ma'am.
Probably within our agro niche into that area. Any questions?
I don't think so, Mary.
Okay, thank you very much. The session is over. I think next is our tea break, isn't it?
Correct. Yes, it is our tea break.
Back to you, Marilyn. My job is over.
You can relax now. I was just wondering, because we had a few more questions on some of those topics there. I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. But I've got a funny feeling that they're going to be a little bit different on the topics because, as I was saying earlier, we've got research supervision groups, mentoring colleagues, and the codes, but I don't think anything appears. What I might do is just add another room and call it general chat. So you can go into there now and follow up some of the questions. So, and you need to self-assign yourself to the room. So they're there, so let's go. There you go. They'll close in 30 minutes. So you'll be all back before that anyway. So thank you. Let's see if I did that right. Morning tea, folks. I've got a coffee brewing and I'm going there. and I will stop.
So can we move between rooms, Merlin? You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to, because that's the selection I made. Self-select and be able to move between the rooms. Yes.
Okay.
If not, I'll try it again for lunchtime. And I'll try. And as I said, I'll stop the recording now because we don't need it at this particular point, because we're recording to the cloud and therefore we can't record the rooms. So if you want to record your discussion, somebody will need to start recording to your own computer. But when we come back, please make certain that we are recording, because everybody who's ever been in a meeting with me knows I forget to restart the recording. See you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Start the recording. So yes. Welcome back, everybody. Right on 11:15, going very well. In our next section, we have Professor Susan Kinnear and Meenu Issar, who will be discussing how you can apply for a research degree at this university. And I'm not certain who's going first, Susan or Meenu? Susan. Then I'll hand over to Professor Susan Kinnear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, and good morning, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying the symposium so far. It's great, especially to see some of our RHD students who are currently studying with us presenting some of their work just before the session in the last session. Sorry, Meenu, Marilyn, I'm looking for the share screen. Oh, here it is. That's right. I didn't think I had hosting rights, but I do. Just bear with me one moment and I'll bring up my slide deck so that you can take a look. So just in terms of how the session will run, I'm hoping to speak for maybe about 20 minutes. I'll try and keep it relatively brief. And I guess my commentary will be around what is a research degree, why might you want to take one up, where might it take you in terms of your research career trajectory, and a little bit of comments around how you actually get started with maybe finding a topic and a supervisor. And then I'll hand over to Meenu Issar. Meenu's joined from the international team this morning, and she will have some much more detailed information about how exactly you go through the admissions process. So, and hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So hopefully everyone's seeing my slide share now at the moment. And I guess I always begin with this cover page, especially when I'm speaking to undergraduate and postgraduate coursework students. There does sometimes tend to be a sentiment around research that it's something that only really brainy people do. And yep, absolutely, we're looking for people who are doing really well in their academic careers. But research is something that anybody can do. What you really need is a passion for your topic, a natural curiosity, and the willingness to work hard, and you can be successful in research. So please don't think that it's not for you, just because you might not be getting a perfect GPA or high distinctions in all of your undergraduate or postgraduate career so far. So just flipping ahead then and thinking about what a research degree actually does, like where does it get you in terms of a career trajectory? And I could speak a lot about this, but I'll try and keep it fairly brief. I guess a quick way to remember this is that it's something that can help you start a career, that can help you progress your career, so access a promotion, for example, or to change your career. So it's really for people who are looking to make a transition for one reason or another, and it can open lots of different doors for lots of different reasons. The average age of our current research cohort that we have studying with us right now, we have just over 600 students, by the way, at CQ, and the average age of those people is around the mid-40s. So they tend to be students who are they're well in their mid-career of their professional life. They might have family commitments, they've got community commitments, but they're looking to make a change in their career for some reason or another. So you might be wanting to retain your existing industry sector that you're already working in. So if you're in the ICT world, you might be wanting to stay in that world, but looking to access leadership roles. So wanting to go up into a management job or wanting to access a promotion. And you need a degree that'll help outcompete some of the other applicants for the same sorts of jobs. And a research degree is great for that because it will help you demonstrate that you've got great communication skills, great analytical skills, the ability to think critically and creatively about things. So it really offers you those advanced skill development. You might be looking to actually change your career. So you might actually be looking to do research as your career option. And that's particularly for the people who are wanting to enroll in a doctoral level study. So that's PhD, for example. interesting statistic for you, only about 1 in every 250 PhD students actually becomes a university professor. So whilst a lot of people have it in their mind that that's going to be exactly what happens to you when you leave your PhD, that's actually not usually the case. It's very rare, in fact. Yes, there are jobs in academia. So a PhD will unlock the possibility that you could come and work for a university, either here or back home if you're an international student, for example. But there's also lots of other things that you can do in terms of a research-intensive career. So you might be wanting to start your own business or company based on the technologies or the ideas that you created during your PhD, and that's really common, especially in the ICT world. You might be looking to do some commercialization of the work that you've created, or any other sorts of different things. You can also go and work for research-intensive companies. So, you can imagine a lot of those global corporations have research and development arms within their actually company structure itself. Or you might go and work for government. Government policymakers often need researchers within their units to help them provide the information they need to make good decisions about how they're forming policy or forming regulations. So lots of really diverse career options. Going to a university afterwards as a career is just one of those. And in fact, it's less commonly the career destination that'll happen for our research students. The last thing I guess I'd mention is just around having a personal interest or a passion in a topic. And certainly we have people in our cohort who are, in fact, they're into their late 60s even or older. So they're at the end of their professional lives. They're not looking to take up a degree because they'd like to go and make themselves lots of extra money and get a flash promotion. What they're looking to do is give back to their community or industry sector, or solve a problem that they've been observing for decades in their industry lives, and they really just want to know the answer and help the industry to move forward. So you can take a research degree even at the end of your professional career, and still it's just a very personally satisfying and rewarding undertaking for that reason. I'm just going to very quickly explain this slide to you, and for some of you, you may already know this information or perhaps not, especially those of you who come from outside the Australian education system. So I'll just be brief with this. But you should be aware that within the Australian system of qualifications, we have 10 levels. For those of you studying right now, you're probably in one of the degree programs, which would mean you're operating at level 7, or you might be, level 7 or level 8, depending on which one, or you might be a postgraduate master's student, so you'll be sitting already at level 9. Levels 9 and 10, as you can see on the slide there, are the highest earned degrees that you can study at an Australian university, and they're globally transportable. So no matter where you go for your career after you leave CQU, it'll be recognised that you have this master's degree or this doctoral level degree. Just something I did want to point out though, for the level 9s, which are titled as master's degrees, just be aware that obviously there's two different kinds of master's degrees. There's a coursework master's degree, and some of you will already be studying one of those. So you might be in the Master of Project Management or Master of Information Systems or whatever. But there's also a research intensive master's degree, and that's the one I'm referring to when I'm speaking about masters in this morning's session. So a level 9 is a master's degree. As I said, would typically be for someone who's looking to stay in their current industry sector, but wanting to just access higher level salary types or higher promotions. The level 10 doctoral degree is typically what you would take if you're thinking to actually change your career to fully concentrate on research as your actual main principal duties within the job that you do. So I just jump forward to this slide. This just describes the key courses that we do have available at CQU. You can search up all of these on the handbook. It's just sometimes easier to have them all on one slide. So we start at the Graduate Certificate in Research. So that is offered from our school, which is the School of Graduate Research. It's a level 8 qualification, and it's actually intended as a pathway. So for those of you who've not done any research before at all, you might be just wanting to get a bit of a feel for what research is like, or you might be needing to take some research qualifications to be able to gain the eligibility to actually get into our master's or doctoral courses. The graduate certificate is the course that you might need to think about. So it's a 6-month-long qualification. It's actually a taught qualification. So you do have a teaching team, but it's also research-based. So you have a research supervisor working with you, and you have a particular topic that you work through with the examples that you do in the assessment. After the grad cert research, we then go into the master's program. The master's program is a 2-year full-time undertaking, or it can be 4 years if you take it part-time. Those of you who are international students, of course, will need to maintain full-time mode as a visa requirement. But if you're a domestic student or studying outside Australia, then it is possible to use the part-time mode. As I was explaining earlier, it's a master's degree where you actually are fully independent on your study topic with 2 academic supervisors helping you. So typically speaking, in a research master's, you don't go to classes, you don't take exams, you don't write assignments. Most of those things don't happen. There is a few exceptions, but most of the time that's not what you're doing. You're actually working on this particular project-based learning exercise. So you pick a project, you design the research that you'd like to do, go ahead and execute that, and then write a thesis, which is basically like a report. From the master's, the next step up to level 10 is then the doctoral level degrees. We actually have a number of different kinds of doctoral degrees at CQU. Probably for this cohort that I'm talking to today, the one that would be of key interest would be the Doctor of Philosophy, and probably you're familiar with that. It's normally abbreviated to PhD. A PhD is a 4-year undertaking full-time, or the equivalent part-time, which would be up to 8 years. We tend to encourage our students to try and aim for 3.5 years, which just gives you that little bit of extra space in case things don't go to plan. You've got some extra time available to make it before you hit that 4-year deadline, which is the standard course duration. So a PhD, as I said, is for research-intensive careers. It allows you to use that title of doctor when you leave the university, so you've actually got a professional title. And you can choose any project that you like within this course, so long as we have the right resources and supervision to support the project idea that you'd like to take. So that can mean multidisciplinary projects. So you might do a little bit of business and, a little bit of ICT and a little bit of business perhaps, or something else that mixes the different qualifications and experience that you already have on your CV. I'll just briefly mention the others, but I'm not sure how interesting they may be for this group. We do have a Doctor of Education, which is specifically for people who are researching an education topic and also working in the working in the education fields. So either they're primary or secondary school teachers, or working at training colleges, or working in the university sector, and they're wanting to pick up a topic on education. For ICT, that might mean you're talking about teaching ICT skills to primary school students, or teaching ICT, as a training option. We also have the portfolio degree. This is a really specialised degree where it's possible to get a PhD in as little as 1 year, which is extraordinarily rapid. The reason it's so quick is because all of the research is actually done prior to you enrolling. So this is a really specialised pathway. For people who've already done research before, you've already got a collection of papers or books or patents or other things that show that you've done research, and basically that 1 year is just spent packaging that work together. So generally speaking, it's not a common one. It's a very boutique or niche style degree, so not too many people meet the eligibility criteria for that. We do have all of these courses available in the offshore mode as well. I know there's not a lot of mobility going on at the moment because of the border closure situation, but if you are thinking to return back home, it is possible to actually take the degrees from the offshore mode. Or if you were to commence onshore with us now, and then things were to change and you needed to move back home, you can actually take that degree with you. It's transportable, so you don't have to abandon your studies partway through. The last one on the list is an exciting one. We've got it just about to open, so it's coming in the next couple of weeks, and it's called our PhD Industry. This is a specialised form of our PhD, which is specific for people who don't have a lot of research experience before, but they'd like to take a project and have the option of either studying some extra coursework units to bring up their skills, or taking an industry placement where you go off to an employer for 3 months and do a little project work for them. So it's not actually in the handbook right now, but it should be there in the next couple of weeks. We're just about to open that one very soon. I'll just try and be quick as I move through this. I'll leave you to read through that slide, but it basically just collects up the key information about the length of time each of those different qualifications take. Just to be aware that for research degrees, we don't use the standard academic calendar, so you don't have to apply at any particular time of year. You can just send in your application when you're ready, and you can nominate a date to start. So we use different term structures for research compared with what you would be used to in your current studies. Obviously, the entry requirements are something that's really important, and usually people would like to ask questions about this. Briefly speaking, if you'd like to come into our Masters by Research degree, we're looking for students to already hold a bachelor level degree, but you need to have it in a relevant discipline area, and it needs to have a strong academic performance. Typically, we're looking for a credit level grade point average or above, to make sure that you really know your content very well before you try and attempt a research project in that space. For the PhD program, the expectation is a little higher. So usually it's a bachelor with honours. However, I will say that not a lot of people have honours degrees these days. Honours degrees tends to be disappearing, except for some professional areas. So the alternative is that you might hold a master's degree, which is a coursework master's, so it's one with subjects in it, but at least 30% of that degree would have some research activity in it. So you might have done a mini project or a capstone project perhaps, or you've taken some methodology subjects as part of your degree structure. Those are the sorts of qualifications that would allow you to enter into the PhD degree. I sometimes get asked, what is the position if you've taken a fully coursework-based master's, so you've not done any research at all? Is it possible to get into the PhD? The answer at the moment is no, because you need to have at least some familiarity with research techniques to be able to succeed at the PhD level. That's why we're asking for honours, or we're asking for you've done some research in your master's. Of course, the exception is going to be that when the PhD industry commences, that particular degree will allow you to actually come in with limited research experience. And the reason is because the PhD industry actually has the first 6 months as foundation research studies. So you actually get that skill level as part of the degree itself. I might leave that there, and I know there might be some questions, but I'll hopefully leave some space for queries about admission criteria later. Just very quickly in terms of what a research student actually does. So I said earlier, you're not going to classes or going to lectures or doing assignments. So what is it that you do on a daily basis as a student? Research degrees are largely unstructured, which means that you pick a project and you basically get to dictate what it is that you do to progress that project. For some students, that will be going off and doing interviews with research participants. For other students, it'll be going off into a laboratory and running trials. For some students, it'll be programming a microchip board or whatever it is happens to be for you guys. So it's very individualised, and it will be you and those 2 academic supervisors working on the project plan and then executing the research design that you need. I don't have the time to go through all the different detail that's on this slide, but just to let you know, we do have a coursework unit that we ask all of our students to take in the first 6 to 9 months. That's called Prepare for Confirmation. So it's a scaffolding unit that helps you understand what we need from you in your research proposal. And that first big research proposal is known as your confirmation. And that's the point at which we get a lot of information from you about kind of research project that you're doing, how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, the permissions you might need, all of those bits and pieces about the logistics of the project. We do have lots of other skilling and training opportunities that happen during a research degree. So you can come along and learn about how to do literature reviews or how to do statistics. You don't need to know all of those things as you come in. We offer the ability for you to learn those things as part of the degree structure. And the way you graduate from one of these degrees is you actually give us a thesis, which is examined by 2 international standard people outside of the university. So it is a really high expectation, but a really satisfying one to be able to graduate from. I know that Meenu's about to commence with some details about the admission process, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, other than to mention that to come through for your admission, you're going to need 3 things. You're going to need to tell us about your background, so give us your CV and explain what qualifications you already have. You'll also need an idea about the project topic that you'd like to study, and ideally you'll need a supervision team. So you'll need 2 supervisors that you've identified from our academic staff who can help you with that topic. Now, if you don't already have a supervision team, you can actually apply without one, and we will help you link up with someone. It just tends to go much faster if you've already made that initial approach and you've started some conversations. And for you this morning, I guess you're lucky because you already know so many of your lecturers already, so you'll have some of those existing connections already. For those people wondering how it is that you come across a project, so how do you imagine what a project is for a master's or a PhD? The best advice I can give you is to speak with other people, learn from other supervisors or other academics that you're working with, talk with some of the students that you've seen presenting today and get an idea about the kind of thing that makes a project. We also have a website listing where supervisors have already actually posted ideas of projects that they would like students to come and join. So that makes your job even easier. You can just go and have a look at that website and have a browse. If you see one you like, you can contact that person and ask if they could work up a proposal with you, or even just looking down the list might help you get an idea of what makes a master's project or what size is a PhD project. With finding supervisors, our rule is that you will need 2 supervisors. That's the minimum. So we can't actually accept you into our degree unless you have 2 supervisors. One is called your principal, who's your main point of contact. The second person is your associate. The principal person always has to be a CQU staff member for us to enrol you here. So you need to keep that in mind. You will need to find a principal supervisor who's on our staff. If you are an international student, it's also ideal, or in fact, it's required, that you study at a campus where at least one of your supervision team is present. So if you happen to be at Sydney or Melbourne, perhaps, you will need to find someone who's at that campus so that we can make sure that you're well looked after as an international student. It is really important to form a really productive and supportive and positive relationship with your supervision team. They're going to be your key points of contact for your whole degree. So they'll need to be someone who understands your research area. So they'll have the, the disciplinary expertise that you're looking for, but they also need to be someone that you can work really well with. So it's a really good idea to spend time getting to know people and choosing the right person who fits you and your learning style. Super quickly, the last part that I need to go through before I hand over to Meenu is just about the funding aspects of research degrees. I guess there's three things to consider here. One is how much does the course cost? So what's the tuition fees? Second is how you're going to support yourself. So what about your income whilst you're studying? And the third thing is how much the research itself is going to cost, which a lot of people sometimes forget about. So just quickly going through over those three things. The course costs has different information according to whether you're a domestic student or an international student. A domestic student we define as someone who is an Australian or New Zealand citizen or who has permanent residency in Australia. So if you're any of those three categories, that would make you a domestic student. The good news for you is that the Commonwealth actually provides you a funded place to study at master's or doctoral level. So that means you won't actually have any tuition fees, so long as you finish the work in the standard time allowed for that course. So for a master's degree, you need to finish in 2 years full-time, or a doctoral degree, you need to finish in 4 years full-time. If you've not finished and you need to keep going, the Commonwealth place runs out and you have to start paying from your own pocket. So we take a lot of emphasis on students making sure they're going through their research on time. For our international students, unfortunately, the Commonwealth place doesn't apply, so you will need to pay full fees. And you can see on screen there the range of fees. It's around 28,000 Australian per year, up to about 32,000 Australian per year. The range will depend on the disciplinary area that you're studying in. For most of the ICT courses, it would be at the lower end of that range because you don't need key infrastructure to actually work with during your project. You'll also need to manage things like overseas health cover, as you usually would for an international student. In terms of scholarships, or how are you going to support yourself whilst you're studying, a lot of our students actually study part-time, at least our domestic cohort do. So they have jobs and they actually study their research degrees on weekends and at nights. That's probably about 2/3 of our cohort do that. So that's perfectly acceptable and doable. In that case, you're probably not looking for a scholarship because you've already got the job or you've got that income happening. If you're wanting to study full-time or international student, you might be looking for some extra living support to help you manage the costs of living whilst you're studying. So we do have some scholarships available. The best place to go for information is that website that you see on screen now. And there's a range of different scholarships advertised there throughout the year, including some ones that come from the Commonwealth and also ones that you can get by partnering up with industry providers and matching a scholarship fund that way. Last point is just around the research itself. So all research costs money. You'll need to buy resources. You'll need to maybe do some travel associated with your project work. What we come from the perspective at CQU is that if you are able to get admission into our degree, we believe you should be supported with some funding to help actually undertake that research. So we make some cash funding available at master's and doctoral level to pay for your project costs and also to get students out to conferences. At the moment, not too many conferences happening because of the border situation, but usually we would have lots of people travelling Australia or worldwide to actually share their research with other people, build networks, get feedback. All of those things are really important. So I'm going to leave it there. I'll just leave it on that slide as in terms of other ideas for how to get involved in research if you don't want to just enrol straight away. If you're currently got maybe another 6 months to run on your undergraduate degree and looking for ways to get an idea about research, there's some ideas there about how you might go about making some of those connections. And if it's okay with you now, Meenu, I'll stop my slide share and hand over to you to talk about the admissions process.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Susan. And hello, everyone. I'll just try to share my screens first, and then we can get started. Okay. Sorry, I'll just be a minute. I don't know what's going on with my screens at the moment.
I'll take advantage of that and just ask Susan a question or two, if I can.
Yep, please do.
Susan, so the grad cert research, that gives students from a pure coursework course into the PhD or the master's?
Both, Marilyn. So it's if you finish the graduate certificate in research with a distinction level average, you're guaranteed a spot in the research master's program, so long as we have supervision for you. That's the only other caveat. For students who've already got a degree or a master's degree, doing the grad cert would probably also qualify you for the PhD. So generally speaking, yeah, it's a really good option to just brush up on those research skills and access the PhD level degree.
Okay, thanks. I see Meenu has her screen up, so I'll hand back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Hello, everyone. I'm Meenu Issar. I'm the manager for international admissions at CQ and I'm based at the Brisbane campus. So lovely to see some of you on the screen and others meeting virtually. So my slides will be pretty quick because I'll just go through the application process for international students going in to study the research course. And considering all of you are currently studying at CQ you are familiar with what university offers and broadly what the application process is like. So I'll quickly go through that. So the application process, when you originally applied for your bachelor's or master's, you may have applied through StudyLink earlier. So even for research courses, you apply through the same format. So you go through the StudyLink, and I've included the link here on these slides, which I'm assuming will be shared with the attendees. There is no application fee. And as Susan has mentioned, for research courses, there is a two-staged process. And I'll go through that in the next slide. Because you are current students with CQ there's not much of the documentation we require because we'll be able to access your academic documents from your prior studies as well as your current CQ studies. So under most of the cases, you will just need to lodge the application and we'll be able to pick up the documents from the current cohort or the application you lodged earlier. With the offer letters, so I'll go through the process on gaining the approvals, but with the RHD applications, because there is a bit of work involved in identifying supervisor, looking at your project, looking at the feasibility of that project within the university, there could be potentially a longer time frame for getting the offer letter. So I would suggest to lodge the applications earlier. So if you are, for example, in your final semester of study now, I would recommend lodging the application now so that we can start the process, and hopefully by the time you complete your degree later this year, you will have an offer if you meet all the eligibility criteria to start your RHD early next year. So that way you're not kind of losing any time. So we accept applications all the time. So there is no deadline, there is no close off date for RHD, and you can just get into that link that I've included in the slide there and lodge the application. I'll come to the scholarships later. So Susan has briefly touched upon all the scholarships that are available outside the international cohort, but we have got additional scholarships for the international students. And all applications we received for admission are assessed for scholarships. And if you're eligible, you will be awarded the scholarship automatically. So there is not a separate process for the application side of things. Key dates, as I mentioned, RHD candidates can start anytime. So we are accepting applications now, even for next year or the year after. So you can just apply on any time. There are two intakes. When you're actually putting the application in StudyLink, you will come across research first half or research second half. Research first half is for any time you are looking at starting between January to June. And then from July to December will be classified as research second half.
And when you're actually lodging the application, you can nominate, I would like to start in September, or I would like to start in October, so that we can look at offering you accordingly. Now, because you are current CQ Uni students, to confirm the offer and confirm a place, you only need to pay $2,000 deposit. So this information will be included in your offer letters when everything is approved. And essentially, once you meet all the conditions, you make this $2,000 deposit, you will be able to commence the RHD or PhD, Masters by Research, whatever you choose to apply for. The admission requirements, I won't spend too much time on this because Susan has covered that in her presentation as well. So again, I've included the link to the handbook in that slide. So you can go into the handbook and look at, if you're looking at Masters by Research or a PhD, what they require. And essentially we are looking at that, research component to get into the PhD. The other thing that I would mention here is with these students who don't have enough research background, as Susan mentioned, there is that graduate certificate of research pathway that the students can take. So for international applicants, we can actually package the offer. So for example, if you don't have enough research in your master's, and we feel that the project area that you have nominated has got the approval through Susan and her team, we can issue you a package offer for GCR, which is the grad cert in research, followed by the PhD. So it will be 2 offers. But that would mean that you are getting, if you need to extend your visa and stuff like that, you can actually extend the visa in one go rather than applying for visa again after the 6 months are over. English entry requirements, usually it's a 6.5 with no subscore below 6. However, because you have been studying at CQ Uni within this university's English language policy, you may meet the English language requirement based on your studies at CQ Uni Australia. So you don't have to sit for another test at this point in time. You will meet the English based on your bachelor or master's level studies at CQ Uni. Okay, so this is the process in a nutshell. When you go into StudyLink and you choose a course, say for example, you choose one of the PhDs, it will take you to an EOI form. So it is a condensed version of the full application form. You will still need to put in information about what your previous studies are. So you might have done Master of Project Management. It will ask you, okay, when are you expecting to finish it? So all that brief information is included in the application form. At this point in time, you do need to have an idea as to what your research topic might be. So within the application form, there are 2 questions that you will need to fill out. It will be the field of study that you're looking at, the title of project, and a brief, like maybe half a paragraph of what that project is all about. So at this stage, at the EOI stage, which is the expression of interest, we don't need the full detailed research proposal. So you can just put in the application form, provide the details of what you are looking at. And if at that stage you have already identified a supervisor, include those details as well, because that actually helps us speed up the process for getting the approvals. If you don't have a supervisor, that's fine too, because as Susan mentioned, we'll try to match you up depending on your research area and the field of study. So that's the first stage. Once the EOI is approved, international admissions team will come back to you and say, hey, your EOI is approved. Now we need the detailed research proposal. And again, in this slide, I've included like a brief template, but we'll include that again when we send you the approval email. And that's when you work on your research proposal in detail. And at that point in time, if you know who your supervisor is, you can engage with them and work on that as well. Submit that back to us, and that's when we'll offer you the full offer letter along with the description of candidature. And that's when the actual acceptance process will commence as well. So that is in a nutshell what the process is. Sounds a bit complex, but once you are in StudyLink, it is relatively simple, and all the fields that when you're going through the application, it will tell you what the next step is. So it's pretty intuitive and pretty straightforward when you are in StudyLink. I've already mentioned about the grad cert of research, so you don't need to separately apply for that. We will add it on if the research team or Santoso or Susan, whoever thinks that you need a grad cert of research. So we will include that in the offer automatically. And again, I've included the links here again, which Susan was briefly mentioning about the project areas that the university is currently focusing on, and also the Find an Expert page, which might be useful if you're looking at potential supervisors in the field of study you are looking at. Okay, the scholarships that are offered to all our international students. So there are 2 scholarships. One is the International Student Scholarship. Now, this is available for any CQ University campus, so which includes the metro campuses as well, so Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney, along with all the others. It's essentially a 25% reduction in your tuition fee for the duration of your course. So once you start the course with us and you have been awarded the scholarship, you retain that scholarship for the duration of the course. For the ISS, which is for the metro campuses, our eligibility criteria is that you need to have a 65% GPA in your previous qualification, which roughly equates to around 4.9 GPA on a 7-point scale. Okay, so when you submit the application and we can see that you have got roughly that GPA, we'll automatically award you the scholarship. And it's pretty generous, actually, 25% over the 4-year period, or if you're doing grad cert of research, it will include the grad cert of research as well. It applies to all research courses. So I've included all the degrees, but again, for benefit of you, it will be the research and any CQ Uni campus. The difference between International Student Scholarship and the International Student Scholarship Regional is basically in the eligibility. For the regional campuses, you don't need that 65% GPA. So as long as you have met the admission criteria to go into the research course, you will be awarded the scholarship. So pretty much all students going into one of our regional campuses, they will get the scholarship. So pretty attractive that way. Now, you will note there is a note at the bottom for 2021 and 2022 admission. We have actually waived the minimum GPA requirements even for the ISS. This is just in response to the COVID, because we do realize that students and their families, they have had a huge financial impact. So just in relation to that, for this year and next year, even for the metro campuses, you don't need to have the 65% GPA. So essentially that requirement has been waived. If you're applying for 2023 and beyond, for the metro campuses, we'll still need the 65% GPA. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But essentially at this stage for this year and next year, anybody who's applying for research course, any campus, they will pretty much get the scholarship, if to make it simpler. And it is a 25% reduction over the duration of your course. And I've just included a website again for more information on these 2 scholarships if you would like to have further clarification. So again, this is separate to the scholarships that Susan was talking about. So, the living expenses or the RTPs or the Elevate scholarships, they are separate to this. So just so that, there is that demarcation. And I think that was pretty much it, because I just thought we'll leave a little bit more time for question and answers. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
I have a question. I'm Nahina. Hi, Meenu. Thanks for the presentation.
Firstly, can we have the slide that you presented, because it has nice information? And if an international student applies to us or emails to us, can we share this slide with them? Yeah.
Yeah, so so should I send these slides to you, Marilyn, and you will share them? Yep. Okay, so we'll share the slides with Marilyn and she'll distribute them. Right. And with the information shared to the students, yeah, absolutely. Or when I actually send the email to Marilyn, I'll include an email address as well that you can refer them to, so that if they have got really specific question about the application process, we can just get in touch with them directly.
Yep. Fantastic, thanks, Meenu. The other question I have, that when we are getting application from international students, due to the travel restriction, they are unable to come. And I think that's going to be applied for 2022 as well, right? Because we're not sure about that. So they can start on studying offshore, and as long as a travel restriction eases, they can come and convert it to onshore. Am I correct?
Yeah, so I'll get Susan to jump in as well. So we have been allowing that for this year and potentially for next year as well, because usually in the first 6 to 8 months, they'll be doing some desktop research anyway. So, but what we have been encouraging students to do is, as soon as they get the offer letter and the COE from us, they should apply for visas, because there is a huge backlog with visa processing, and it's taking a very long time, so that whenever the borders open, if the student has got the visa, they can travel immediately. So that they are not waiting for the borders to open to apply for visa, because that will push them back for another 3 to 4 months.
Of course. And in that case, if they're studying offshore, are they eligible for those scholarships or the 25%?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as long as their offer letter and the COE is for an on-campus offering, they will be eligible for those scholarships.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so technically the PhD offshore, for example, if that is what they're applying for, so not the PhD in Melbourne, Sydney, or Rockhampton, or wherever, PhD offshore, the international student scholarships don't apply.
Perfect.
So
Thanks.
The international student scholarships only for the on-campus.
If I can just jump in there to clarify, what Meenu is speaking about there is the tuition-based scholarships. The scholarships we're talking about were to do with the payment of living expenses, so it's a stipend or a living allowance. Those ones can't be paid to students whilst they're in offshore mode. We have restrictions about being able to move the money across to them. So at the moment, those scholarship rounds are closed unless people happen to be here in Australia. But as soon as the border situation has changed, we'll make some more advice about that.
Thanks, Susan.
Hello, I'm Peck. I want to ask a question. Can I?
Please do.
I just wonder whether research office, maintain a list of countries saying that students from this country can only be offered an off-campus study. Now, because before COVID-19, around 2 years ago, I received an email inquiry from a student from Iran, expressing want to study for our on-campus PhD study. And I actually, had several Zoom meetings with him, helping him to improve the research proposal up to a standard that I satisfy. And then the student launched a formal application, but later received an email saying that he can only be offered, an off-campus study. And eventually, he refused to take up that offer and moved to another university. So I guess, if our faculty staff already have a list saying that, which country, can only receive, off-campus study, then as long as we receive an email inquiry, then we can immediately ask the student whether they are preparing to accept, an off-campus study if, the application is successful. So that saves a lot of time.
Heck, I might jump in there and begin an answer, and then perhaps Meenu may like to add her thoughts as well. There are certainly some regions of the world in which to manage visa refusal risk for the university, there is a choice being made to only offer offshore mode of study. So that's not to say that they're not welcome to study with us, they absolutely are, but they would only be in offshore mode, and that's because you don't require a visa to study in offshore mode. We don't have a list published about those nations because the advice changes. So it's a combination of the university's internal decision making about how much risk they want to take on for international visas, and also the advice coming from the Department of Home Affairs around, you know, global dynamics, etc. My recommendation to you would be, if you are being approached by students, particularly from African and Middle Eastern nations, those ones tend to be the ones that are in the conversation, but not always. If you're approached by someone from that region, always encourage them to lodge their application with StudyLink online, because then the international team will do the pre-processing with that student and advise them as to what they're eligible for. So that way our supervisors aren't spending a lot of time developing up project proposals for someone whom they may find later is not eligible to actually come into Australia. To be honest, that's the best advice for any applicant that you may be dealing with, is to tell them to put their application through into StudyLink if they're international, or just on to apply online, because then we can check that all of the other bona fides are correct for that student before you go spending a lot of time investing in them. Meenu, I don't know if you would like to add anything further to that.
Yeah, no, completely.
What we mean is I encourage a student to submit the application even though they don't have, you know, the formal detailed research proposal.
Yeah, they can do that, Pack, because it is the two-stage application. So that's why exactly we have the two stages. So the first one is an initial proposal, which just is the very high-level detail about the project and the student's background, so the pre-processing can happen. If they check all those, if they pass all those initial checks and we think we have supervision, then you can spend the time on a detailed proposal with them.
Okay,
which is stage 2.
Yep. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Susan, a very quick question. I think we don't have time. Very quickly, I know you mentioned about PhD in industry and also PhD by portfolio. Now, I have two questions. Is there any way on the horizon, let's say in the future, introduce a master by over the industry base, as we have PhD industry? You are going to introduce this one. Maybe it's a good understanding of the, at the early stages to prepare students for the PhD level. Second, you mentioned PhD by portfolio. I know this is about students' publication before they enroll. What about PhD by publication? Generally, I know some people studying in Macquarie and Sydney University at the moment, they are doing like that. But my own daughter already finished Sydney University, and during this studentship, more than 800 citation already attracted. So basically, yes, can we introduce something like that? Once they enroll, they start publication, let's say after 2 or 4 years time, they continue. This is the way maybe we can also increase our era. So is there any way, I mean, you are planning about this? Thank you.
Thanks, Ergun. I'm mindful of time, so I'll be super brief. The first question, which is around masters with industry, at this point, we don't have plans to develop a specific course for that. We're focusing on the PhD industry, which is also responding to the Commonwealth's directions on those particular courses. So for the moment, our focus is doctoral. Having said that, there's no reason why a current master's student cannot pick up an industry placement in industry. There's nothing precluding that. We don't have a specific degree for it, but there's no reason it couldn't happen. On the matter of PhD by portfolio or publication, I think it's important to make the distinction that the portfolio degree is about research that's already created prior to the enrolment commencing. The PhD by publication or with publication is where the student creates outputs whilst they're enrolled with us. So they enroll in a standard master's or doctoral degree, and they're quite welcome to publish some or all of their research chapters as publications along the way. So we really welcome that. We encourage it. It's good for their feedback. It's good for their development. It's great for their CV. But we don't have specific requirements within the degree structure that they must produce a certain minimum number of publications to be able to graduate. So we currently don't have that at CQ. We just allow some, all or none, depending on which particular situation the student happens to be in.
Okay, thank you.
Might hand back to you, Marilyn, because I know we're bang on time. So,
thank you very much. Yes, as you say, bang on time. In our feedback form, we ask if people are looking for any further information on the session. So if when they come up, as I'm sure they will, we'll send them on to you, and Meenu, of course. So thank you, and I do believe it's lunchtime. And I've opened up the breakout rooms again. Let's see if I've done it properly this time. Thanks. I'll turn the recording off and remind me to put it back on. And
Marilyn, did you, the ERA talk scheduled for 12, do you want to do, we
is
can do
it
that
12?
up?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was lunch at 12. I really should turn this over. Sorry, go for it.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, everybody. I know everyone's digestive system got excited there.
Sorry, Steve, just one quick moment. Marilyn, you need to record again.
Okay.
All
so
done?
just,
Yes.
yeah.
And I'll just sit back here and not say another word.
All right. Just let me, sorry, I'm just bringing up PowerPoint. So just let me share the screen. Okay, so hopefully you've got the slides there. Marilyn's nodding, that's good. Okay, so I apologize. I have given this talk before in various forums, but it is an important one. So we'll go through it again. So you've probably all heard about ERA rounds. So since 2010, the federal government through the Australian Research Council, the ARC, has been running a program where universities need to report on various benchmarks, primarily publications, but other factors come in like the FTE of staff conducting research, things like that. So first round was in 2010, and then 2012, 2015, and 2018, so every 3 years. And in each round, they assess research output over a 6-year window. So in the 2018 round, that was from 2011 until the end of 2016. So it takes a couple of years for them to analyze all the results and put out the results. The next round, which should have been 2021 this year, was put off by the ARC until 2023. So that's the current round, and it will be considering publications from the start of 2016 up until the end of December this year. So there's only a few months left where, you know, we can generate input to be considered for this round. And the ERA looks at research performance in field of research codes, or FOR codes. They start off at the 2-digit level, which is very broad. These codes have changed. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to use the 2018 codes at the moment. So for example, 08, field of research code 08 is ICT, or Information and Computing Science. Then it drops down to more specific disciplines. So 0801 is artificial intelligence and image processing. I've also got an example for engineering there that shows that it actually also goes down into the 6-digit level. So mechanical engineering, which is a 4-digit code, also breaks down into various other smaller things. For the purposes of ERA, we're really only interested in the 2- and 4-digit levels. So for example, that would be 08, so that's ICT in general, and then 0801 is the AI and image processing. And just as I mentioned, so for this current round, they've released a new coding system. I think I have examples of that in the next slide. So the numbers have changed, and also the codes have changed. So for example, AI and image processing, which is the main FOR code for the Centre for Intelligent Systems, those two disciplines are now split. They're two separate codes. Why might be, well, I think just reading between the lines, I think the bigger universities aren't happy that a small university like CQU, for example, got the highest score in electrical and mechanical engineering. You only need 50 papers in a discipline over the 6 years. So if you have a small number of really good quality papers, you can score very, very well. And in fact, in engineering, we scored higher than some of the G8. So that might have something to do with it. So a divide and conquer strategy by splitting up disciplines, it makes it harder for smaller institutions to reach volume. that's just not just my theory, that's the sort of theory within the exec here as well. But it is what it is. And I guess, as the astronauts used to say to me, it's another chance to excel. So, we without having any say in it, we'll probably be targeting more FOR codes. And just to explain that a little bit more, so our strategy is, because we're a small institution, we need 50 papers in each code to be ranked. So we want to try and focus our efforts into just a small number of FOR codes where we have sort of critical mass of research. So mechanical engineering is an obvious one. That's the railway guys. Then also the biofuels team, the pyrolysis also fits into that. So that may be changing. And for CIS, for the Centre for Intelligent Systems, that was AI and image processing. They've now split that into image processing and machine learning. So that's so the output from the CIS will now be split across two. Should be okay, but you can see the sort of a game we're playing here. Like, this is part of the sort of strategy here is to essentially work out ways of classifying research, and particularly good quality papers, to go into FOR codes where we're going to make volume. And the flip side of that is papers, you know, we unfortunately have a very large tail, which is the papers that get 0 citations. They act like an anchor on your ranking. So you may have 30 great papers, but if you've got 20 papers with 0 cites and they have to be included, that really drags down your ranking. So there's also a bit of a game of, okay, let's try and divert those into an FOR code where we don't make volume so they don't get assessed. So there is a bit of, I won't say gaming of the system. All the universities do it, but we're basically trying to, well, we're obviously trying to present the best case for our research. The ARC obviously is not stupid. They're aware of this, and that's why things keep getting changed up. For example, in the last round, they used Scopus as a source for the citation-based disciplines up until 2015. Then at the last minute, they changed to Web of Science. We don't know what it's going to be this time. The other thing is that, okay, it's not that we just decide, okay, all right, this paper is 0801 AI and image processing. The way that something is placed into one of those categories or FOR codes is the journal it's published in. Each journal will have codes associated with it. And that, so as long as we put it into one of the codes that that's associated with a journal, we're okay. There can be exceptions to that rule, but it's best not to push that too hard. Just as a sort of example of what can go wrong, the agricultural guys pushed a lot of papers into an FOR code. I think it might have been agricultural management or something like that. But the ARC tweaked and said, no, these papers shouldn't be in there, and they weren't ranked in that discipline. So you got to be careful. Following the rules is the best way to do it. These are the new codes. I can share these all these files with Marilyn when we get to it. Now, where's ICT? 40 something. Information and Computing Sciences is now 46. Engineering is 40. Not a big deal, but it's just a change in the numbering scheme, and they've split some codes. Here's the new codes. Highlighted in green are the ones that we're definitely making volume in and will be ranked in. And as I mentioned, so artificial intelligence and machine learning are now 2 different codes. And image processing is its own as well. Where did that go? Computer vision is 4603. So those largely where Brajesh's output and his team will go. Ones in yellow are ones that I think maybe emerging areas. I don't know about this round, but next time we're very keen in getting something happening with cybersecurity. You know, we've got the new masters, we've got some active researchers in that field, and it is clearly a very important issue that's only probably going to get more and more important as we have more and more of an international reliance on information systems. And the other one I think might be quite handy is 4601, applied computing. I think we could argue almost everything, all research done in this field in ICT college, with some exceptions, could be classed as being applied computing. If there's some end user, I mean, even Brajesh's stuff with the Department of Main Roads, TMR. So there is an option there as well. And for example, the data science group, Nahina and Nasan and Santoso, all those guys working with the agricultural people, I mean, it could well fit within machine learning, for example, if that's the approach they're taking, but applied computing could also be another option. And there's going to be a lot of other ones in here where people will say, oh, well, hey, that's me. Like maybe Pac would probably think software engineering, maybe. I don't know, Pac, if that's right. I'm just using this example. And then there's networks somewhere, things like that. That's fine. But just remember, we need at least 50 papers, good papers, over 5 years. So we're reluctant to, the university has taken the approach, and this goes right up to the vice president research level, is that we only support research where we believe there's enough critical mass to positively affect our ranking as a university. So it's, I guess we can have a long-term strategy to try and build up things. So for example, cybersecurity, we wouldn't have enough volume, I don't think, at the moment, but maybe in 3 years' time or 5 years' time in the next round, we may do that. But I'm really open to any feedback about these. If people think there's like a critical mass, and by that I mean you're not the only person who thinks so, like if there's a group of you and you're publishing and you feel, let us know now, because that's a good time for us to sort of look at the output and start planning about how we can present that. Here's just some examples of, here's some journals. This is, the example is from engineering and project management, but same deals apply. So you can see here that Energies, which is a journal quite a few of the biofuels guys publish in, especially for reviews. So 02 physical sciences, 09 engineering. It's got 2 codes associated with it. So obviously we put it in 09. What's really nice about this is that they're only doing it at the 2-digit level, which means we can plonk that in probably pretty well anywhere at the 4-digit level. So those generic ones are nice, quite nice. Here's project management. This one's got 3 codes. So built environment or commerce or ICT. So we do have choices. I should put out though, this is the 2018 ERA list. The ARC don't provide this list, and they've told us that they revised this coding until after the publication window closes. So we can't use this as a planning document. We can only really base it on the last round and hope that things don't change too much. So I can't provide you now with, I can provide you with the 2018 list, which will show you what these codes are, but we don't know what's going to happen for the next round. We probably won't know until the end of the year. And Steve Hall touched on this, and I did earlier as well, but basically Coldrake did a report, a review. So now they're saying that by 2030, we'll need an ERA ranking of 3 or above. So ERA goes from 1, well below world standard, to 5, well above world standard, with 3 being at world standard. And you need to achieve that in at least half of the broad 2-digit fields of education where courses are delivered. So this is to maintain university status. So essentially, if you do not do that, if your research is not ranking it as at least world standing across half of your areas that you're teaching, so ICT would be an example of a teaching area, then you drop down into a college, university college, and that's a new designation that was legislated just recently. No one's in it yet, but that's so basically a teaching only university. So that's a rung below full university. Here's the rankings I just mentioned. I showed this morning, but Mathematics there can be some real quirks in this. So before my time, we had Chin Long, who was a brilliant mathematician in our school, published lots of fantastic papers because he was an adjunct and there were CQ staff. His effect has sort of, because of that 6-year window, right up until 2018, we've been getting 5s, the highest ranking in that. That's going to drop off precipitously because after that last round, we can't count his papers anymore. So that's a bit of an anomaly. So ICT, you can see that we've attained 3 at both the 2 and 4 digit level. So that's at world standard. So that's the minimum that we need to stay at. Engineering, we got a 5 in electrical for the first time. I like to think my papers coming in got that over the top. Mechanical engineering got a 5, and that was up from a 4 and a 2 from 2012. Interesting at the foot. What you might say, if we got 2 5s here at the lower level, how come it's only a 4 at the top level? What's that implying is that the 2-digit level, they look at every single paper published, whereas in those 4-digit codes, we're only looking at only electrical, only mechanical. So that implies there is a lot of other papers that aren't as good. And as I say, that's dragged our ranking down from a 5 to a 4. So, and this is why a lot of some people get upset because, they want to go to have a paper in a conference, they want funding. And I say, well, no, because doesn't make any sense for the school. It's because I go look at these conference proceedings, and often you'll see years after they come out, they have no citations. People just don't cite them. I know ICT is a bit different. I think conferences, there's very good quality conferences and they are really impactful in your discipline. So that's more engineering, but across the board, if you're going to a conference, it really has to be something that's top quality. Otherwise, not only does it cost us money, but it drags down our rankings. 2 types of assessment. I won't really go. So engineering is a citation-based code, so they look really at the number of citations. It's much easier because you can pretty well get a good idea how you're going to go. ICT, computer science, for some bizarre reason, is peer-reviewed, which is much more sort of like how the humanities are done, where you nominate 30% of research output, so that's publications, conference proceedings, books, submit it to peer review. So this is the smoky room. We have no idea what goes on. There's been quite a few studies. It's really interesting. Peer-reviewed subjects, the rankings are significantly lower than disciplines that are citation-based. So that seems to be an across-the-board thing. So the peer review is tougher, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but it's interesting that doing that peer review process is where I guess it's much more of a subjective thing. The outcomes aren't as good. As I've mentioned, you need to get at least 50 papers to be ranked at the 4-digit level, also at the 2-digit. This is from engineering, but it still just shows you that concept about how at the 2-digit level, we had a lower ranking than the 2 5s we got in mechanical and electrical engineering. We had quite a few papers in civil, but didn't make volume, but not that great quality. And that dragged us down. Where you publish matters. I know I've been really trying to jawbone down conferences. So when I started in 2016, I had a look at previous years, and the green is conference publications. This is the total output from the school. So we were publishing significantly more conference papers than journal papers. And so I sort of tried to rein in the amount of, essentially the only way I could is by saying, okay, well, one thing I can do is not pay for conferences. So that brought the numbers down. This stops at 2018, but 2019, actually it shot up again. I don't know, maybe I've got soft in my old age, but 2020, good old viral RNA certainly dragged conferences way down again. So, but the nice thing is that even though the conferences have come down, the journal papers have gone up. So for me, I feel like I'm succeeding because I don't want to reduce the number of publications. I want to divert people using conferences as the avenue of choice for publishing into journals, because the school and I think the employee get much more benefit out of a good quality peer-reviewed journal paper than a conference publication. And to show you, I've actually just updated this for the 5-year school report, but this is an older slide, but the numbers are still essentially the same. So I looked at 5 years of Scopus publications. We had 375 conference papers, averaging 2.3 cites a paper. And the dreaded tail, which is what really kills you when you're in rankings, 0 citations. So a paper that has 0 citations, especially 6 years after the fact, is deadly, was 44%. So almost half the conference papers, even up to 5 years later, had no citations. And this is not uncommon. Journal articles cited on average over the same period, 9 cites per paper at a 21% tail. So especially for the citation-based codes, obviously you've got almost more than a 4-to-1 factor in terms of getting more citations. Now, I know peer review, they say citations don't matter, but I still think that the quality of the journal output matters, even if it's a subjective evaluation. So I still think this generally applies across all of the disciplines in school. Journal selection is really important, and this is where I try and advise people as much as I can, especially if you're going for open access, which is a thing that I started that a few years ago, managed to convince Cole Greensall, because I had some peer-reviewed journal papers that showed that the ERA only looks at the 3 years after publication, so that's the critical window for getting citations. And now several studies have shown that if you take a journal of an open access paper where the journals are sort of equivalent stature, that you get significantly more citations with an open access paper than you do with a regular paper. And I think it makes sense because there's a lot of institutions around the world, educational institutions, that can't afford a couple of $100,000 for an IEEE package, for example, their library. So it just means the amount of researchers that you can reach with your real paper is vastly expanded. As I said, the ARC release comes out too late for planning purposes, but the best thing we can do is just rely on the previous round's list. We don't know whether they're going to use Scopus or Web of Science. In a way, it doesn't really matter. Web of Science is more restrictive than Scopus, so the citations tend to be a bit less. But if it's a good journal on Scopus, it'll be a good journal on Web of Science. So that's the uni still is using Scopus in terms of all planning. So that's why I tend to use Scopus. Really look at the metrics. SNP is what I like. It's source normalized impact factor. One means that if you're looking at a journal in a particular field, say it was artificial intelligence, its SNP was 1. It was saying that, okay, compared to all the other journals in this discipline, this journal gets on average, an average amount of citations. If the SNP was 2, it would say, okay, in this field, this journal gets, on average, a paper in this journal gets twice as many citations. So SNP's just a really easy way of visualizing. Anything above 1 is good. That means, the chances are you're going to get more citations than if you publish in a journal with a lower SNP. And if you want to publish open access, if you want funding for that, then you definitely need these high metrics, because we're not going to pay $3,000 to $5,000 to publish somewhere that on average gets the same or less citations as other journals. And please avoid conference proceedings. If that used to be the days when it was publish, perish, and it was all about publication quantity. So conferences were a good way of hitting that box, but the days are gone where it's like, oh yeah, I'm teaching and research. I've got to do some research. I'll go to a conference in term 3 and tick the box. It just doesn't cut it anymore, and it's hurting your own research output and the schools. And if you're interested in promotion, quality of publications is looked at very, very closely. So, it's for everyone's interest to avoid that if you can. That being said, I do know, especially in the sort of machine learning AI space, there's a lot of very high tier conferences. That's obviously a different matter. And with that, I sort of defer to Brajesh. Like he tries to make sure that only the top-notch conferences are supported. Because as I say, we don't have the money to support much conferences anyway. And please look at, when you're looking at journals, try and look at the historical, like the last round's journal list, and sort of be picking journals where your paper's going to count in one of the FOR codes we're looking at. And this is the last slide, so I think I'll be right on time. We use Scopus internally, so the research division, mainly because the executive has tied KPIs around performance at that level to the Times higher education rankings and Scopus data, so citations, journal quality, all that sort of stuff. Also international collaboration, whether you're collaborating with people overseas, that accounts for almost 40% of the ranking. And as I mentioned this morning, we've dropped quite a bit in rankings because the publication quality is dropping off a bit. So people often ask me, why are we using Scopus when Web of Science is what ARC is using? Well, I mean, that could flip-flop back to Scopus for all we know for this current round. We don't know yet. But anyway, but if it's a good journal on Scopus, it'll be a good journal on Web of Science and vice versa. So that's sort of the bottom line. So Marilyn, I think now we can go to lunch.
Thank you for that. Any questions though, Steve?
I do have a quick question. Thank you, Stephen. That was very informative. The question I have is self-citation. What about self-citation in the ranking? Do they filter them out, or they consider self-citation also as a citation?
That's a good question. I do remember getting lectured to about that at some point. I think for all intents and purposes, it doesn't really matter, because it's either filtered out or it's not. And if it's filtered out, then everyone's filtered out. So it just would bring the whole base down of citations. But what aspect do you mean?
It's because the reason I ask is to devise the strategy. When we publish a paper, the next paper, we intend to cite our papers. Now,
right, yeah. And we all do that. We all do that. Yeah.
We just want to know so I can do better strategy in terms of self-citing.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to get you anywhere though, in the end. I really don't. I mean, it's good if you've written papers and where you have authors from other institutions or particularly overseas, because then when you cite your own paper, it's like social media, it just spreads out. But yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, if it's relevant, you always cite your own papers. I guess it's almost like, but you don't want to go overboard on it, and I don't think that's a way to improve the standings of your paper. I don't think you're going to get much return out of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, folks?
Just to comment on the self-citations, I think the Web of Science removes self-citations. So if that's the index used, it doesn't.
Yeah, and I don't think Scopus does, because there's about a 20% difference so that could well be it. But as I say, I think as it's across the board thing, I think the only way it would factor in is if you took it to a ridiculous degree where 90% of the citations for each of your papers is only yourself. So, then I guess it's going to fall apart. But it is interesting though, just not so much self-citations, but how changing views on citations. The guy from Scopus showed us this plot, and it was a plot of 2019 versus 2018 Times higher education rankings. So normally that's like a 45-degree line. Like if you ranked 100th in the world in 2018, you were roughly around 100 in the world in the next year. But there was all these universities from Eastern Europe that just plummeted. And it was because they relied on, they wanted to build up very quickly. So the reason I'm mentioning this is I think it's like sort of trying to use strange strategies to try and artificially boost your citations. They went through predatory publishers and so they published a lot of papers very quickly. Pump them out and manage to get some citations. But just because a journal's on Scopus today doesn't mean it's listed on Scopus or Web of Science tomorrow, because journals do, like MDPI as an example, a lot of people are publishing in that now. 10 years ago, that was listed as a predatory publisher. It was on Beale's list. It popped up on Scopus, went away again, but now for 10 years straight, it's actually back on Scopus and it seems to be growing in stature. Those Eastern European universities, suddenly Scopus went, no, all those journals, they took them out. So suddenly their citations plummeted and their rankings dropped. So I think if you sort of try to artificially inflate things, you're going to get caught out one way or another eventually. So maybe that's a roundabout way of saying I don't think it's going to work.
Thanks, Steve. Just one more call. Any other questions? No? In that case, we are going to lunch, and I'll stop the recording, and I've tried again to open the breakout rooms. So let's give it a go. Okay, thank you. I'll see you in half an hour, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
And Steve Moore, are you back with us? However, he's sharing the session with Santoso Wibowo and Nahina Islam. Shall I dash down and knock on his door? Well, what are we going to do? Steve was leading this session. Give me a second. Typically, I make the phone call and Steve picks up the phone. Okay, Steve, we're now into the 1 o'clock session, and it is research groups and mentoring colleagues. And I'll hand over to you.
I think Santoso was going to.
Santoso and Nahina.
Nahina.
But I thought you were leading it, so I'll leave it up to you. Yeah. Okay.
Not to my knowledge. I'm going to throw to Santoso in my role as leader of this session. So.
Right, thanks.
Well done.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session. I'm actually going to discuss about the data science group. Steve Moore initiated this group 2 years ago, and he actually came up with this idea to have data science group to be operating from different campuses, and there are actually several projects that we might be able to contribute and work together with other schools as well as some institutes. So Nahina and I actually are going to present on what we actually have been doing in relation to this specific group. I've actually taken this quote of Albert Einstein from Susan Kinnear. So she actually has got one of these on her slides. And when I put it up, Nahina was saying, wow, that's actually nice. So yeah, I just have to, continue putting this on. So who are we? We are ICT academics, and we are actually from different campuses. And at the beginning, we have members from Sydney, Melbourne, we have Brisbane, Rockhampton, and also other campuses like Townsville and so on. And we are knowledgeable. So basically, we actually have got background in AI, machine learning, and image processing. And in fact, we are just not limited to having this background, because some of us are also passionate about artificial intelligence, as well as the different types of algorithms that we can actually use. We are focused on solving real-world problems. So this particular group, somehow it's quite informal in operations. There are a few early career researchers involved in this group. And what we do is that we are passionate about using our knowledge in AI and so on, and be able to contribute in solving real world problems. And basically, I'm actually going to discuss about what kind of problems or what kind of applications that we are involved in. Now, several activities that we are actually involved in at the current stage. Bear in mind, over the past 2 years, we actually have been working together. And obviously, this is based on passion. So based on what we actually want to achieve. So we have formed collaboration with various schools and School of Health Sciences, for example. And then some of us also are conducting research with our colleagues with centers. For example, Center of Intelligent Systems. We are also involved with conducting collaboration with Institute of Future Farming Systems, for example. Some of us are involved in collaboration with several universities in Australia, for example, like Monash, RMIT, Latrobe, as well as overseas universities. We have submitted several grant applications. We have submitted competitive grant applications with academics from School of Engineering on weed detection and also laser treatment. We also have submitted grant applications with different institutes as well at CQU. We now have extended our activities. So a couple of our research students are actually involved in what we're actually doing. For example, Nahina and myself, we have students who are working on data science project. For example, one of our students is actually working on crop yield detection, and another student is basically working on weed detection. So these are some of the projects that basically we are involved in at this stage. Now, these are the list of our current projects, not limited to these ones here. So the first one is weed detection. With weed detection, we actually collaborate with Institute of Future Farming Systems at Bundaberg, headed by Professor Phil Brown. We are also conducting research on crop yield estimation. So one of our PhD students is basically conducting this research. And the data that we are trying to obtain at this stage is from Pakistan farm. But of course, it will be extended to what we have in Australia as well. For example, maybe Bundaberg and other places like in Victoria. A couple of our students are also conducting sentiment analysis. For example, looking at in terms of things like their sentiments through Twitter, Facebook, YouTube videos. For example, you can see the picture on the right in terms of whether they look sad, whether they look happy, whether they look shocked, and then we actually basically classify them in terms of their sentiments. The next thing also we look at in terms of fraud detection. So we are using machine learning algorithms and also deep learning algorithms to detect fraud. And the other project that we are also looking at is speech recognition. For example, one of the research students is looking at when a bus comes close to the bus stop, then there'll actually be things like maybe voice announcing to disabled people that this bus number is approaching, this is the destination, and all these sort of things that we're actually looking at. So basically, what we are doing is to look at how, for example, things like machine learning algorithms, deep learning algorithms can actually be used to solving real-world problems. Now, the next part that I'm actually going to pass to Nahina, who is going to discuss in specific the two projects that we actually currently involved in. Thank you.
Thanks, Santoso, and hello, everyone. Santoso has pretty much presented most of the works, but before I go into a specific project, I would just like to mention that when I joined CQU, I was struggling, like, how do I start collaboration work? And my gratitude to Steven Moore that he initiated this group, because via this group, I got to work with colleagues from the school and from other school, as well as with other research centers. So it is I found it an excellent opportunity to work collaboratively with the colleagues within CQU. So our first project that we started in collaboration with IFFS was with detection, where the colleagues from IFFS helped us to provide data, which is the most crucial part of any research, we all know. So they provided us data from Bandarbark farm, and then we processed that, we applied machine learning on that, and this is the result that you can see in the screen, that we could, so our algorithm could automatically detect the weed, and we could locate where they are, and also their coordinate within the big farm. So the advantage was it reduces manpower, and we could directly say that this is where the weed are, and then the eradication process could be applied there.
Nahina, you are mute.
Have I been mute all this time?
For a brief moment.
Oh, okay. Thanks for correcting that, right? The next slide, please, Santoso. Thank you. So as I was saying, that the weed detection project, I don't know where at which point did I went back to mute. So the project was associated with IFFS. So they provided us the image and the data, and we applied artificial intelligence on that to detect the location of weed. So you can imagine when it's a big farm, this algorithm could detect where the weeds are, so that we can send manpower on only those areas. Based on that preliminary work, these are the publications that we published. So that's one of the journal article and one conference article. And part of this project was funded by New Staff Research Grant 2019 round 2. And we have now planned to extend that project where we can apply artificial intelligence technique to eradicate as well. Also, as Santoso was mentioning, based on this project, we applied for a grant together with other colleagues from the School of Engineering, where we are applying the laser technique to eradicate weed and infestation as well. Next slide, please, Santoso. Okay, so another part of our work of this group is morphology detection of seagrass, which again, we are applying image processing and artificial intelligence. We are doing it with collaboration of Coastal Marine Ecosystem Research Center, where they're helping us with data, and we are applying image processing and machine learning to detect different morphological parameter of the seagrass, and these would be really helpful for the ecosystem as well, like to detect what kind of seagrasses are available in different parts, and also that would help us to do classification as well. Next one, Santoso. Thank you. And also, these are some of our other research activity related to remote sensing. For example, with one of our PhD students, we are doing crop yield estimation, for which we have industry partner internationally. As Santoso mentioned, the industry partners are located in Pakistan, and they are providing us in-kind support, and most importantly, the data. And we have planned to take it further as well to the next step. At the same time, with some colleagues from IFFS, we are working with satellite image processing, which has different applications. For example, in one of the small research group, we are working with soil parameter detection using satellite image processing, such as soil moisture, pH level, etc. And also with them, we are working on deforestation monitoring using satellite image processing as well. So these are the few work that we are working at this moment, but it has, I mean, all of them has good prospect, and we would be happy to expand it and collaborate with anyone who are interested and take it to further step. So that was mostly what we are doing in our group with our colleagues, and happy to take any questions.
So yeah, thank you. So at this stage, basically, we are working together based on mutual understanding and basically based on our interests. And we are looking at grant opportunities and further collaborations. Yes, Steve, you have a question.
Yeah, look, thank you, Santoso. Thank you, Nahina. On the crop yield work, does this in any way connect with what Kerry Walsh is doing and trying to commercialize?
I think Kerry Walsh is doing things because I actually have a student who graduated and joined him for a scholarship, and they're actually using IoT and so on as well. Yeah, you could be right. So also he's looking at in terms of measuring things like agriculture products and stuff. Yeah. I've been trying to get in touch with my student. Marilyn knows him too, Shiran. And I've been trying to get in touch with him and see whether we can actually contribute with his research group, because he mentioned to me they also go to Northern Territory and stuff to further extend the research. So something that I'm actually looking at, because he was looking at development of Internet of Things and so on, and development of algorithms. But what we are also doing at this stage is basically our PhD student Nahina has managed to get some data, and the PhD student is actually conducting simulation. And we want to be able to actually have that to be able to be presented to Kerry Walsh and see whether we can conduct collaboration.
Just as a response, I mentioned at the beginning, collaboration is hard, but it's a two-way street. It has to be. So, you know, if someone is not a sharer, you won't be able to collaborate.
I agree. I agree. The thing is that a lot of them want us to be able to prove to them that we are capable of doing it. And that's why we actually are conducting small projects, publications and stuff, and say, hey guys, we have this. So yeah, that's where we start. Any other questions?
Santoso, so can you give me an idea how many active members are there of the group at the moment, would you say?
Mainly they are in Melbourne. So we have got about 7.
Okay.
Yeah. And the research students, we have, from what we have so far, I haven't actually considered the rest, but we have about 3 research students who are working in this area. And we also have involved Nahidul from Institute of Future Farming to be one of the associate supervisors for the crop yield estimation.
Oh, good. Now that's great. If we can get joint supervision with the institute, that would be great. Do you think there's room for growth? So I think I haven't got the final official word, but I think that MLA, the Meat and Livestock Australia project, is going ahead, the last I heard. And I think Nahina and Arson and I think are listed as investigators on that. Is that correct, Nahina?
Yes, yes.
So that's good. I mean, it's the school is basically getting a PhD scholarship, but you know, it's what's really good is that like 2 years in, and so we've got something we can point at as well as the joint publication. So I guess I won't put you on the spot now, but just sort of, I guess we need to start thinking about, okay, so how can we grow this? Maybe we can sort of start looking, because I don't think it necessarily has to be purely agriculturally focused. So, you know, don't have to answer now, but I guess at some point we'll talk about expanding it. The other thing I'll just briefly mention, Steve Hall asked me to set up some new research groups. So the idea is that for it to be, I guess, potential centres, you know, the start of a potential centre. So the first one off the rank was the microgrids group. So that's the team that was formerly led by Peter Wools. Sujatha is going to take over that. And the model we're going to use is we're going to fund them at a level less than what the centres get, but you know, a substantial amount, enough to facilitate engagement. So basically travel for engagement and stuff. The data science group is, I think I have mentioned this to you, but I just for the benefit of the college now. So you guys are going to be the second cab off the rank. So basically we want to try and set it up so you have a little bit more autonomy, that, you know, you don't have to come running to me every time you want to travel somewhere to engage with industry or try and get a project up and running. So I think with that might be the time where maybe we can start thinking about, you know, how we want to expand that, expand the group and other potential areas. But yeah, I think it's worked out really well. These things always depend on the people who are in it. It's really easy to get a group of people on board at the start, but you guys have just kept plugging away, and we're seeing some real outcomes now. So it's really good. And also, I don't have a good feel for how realistic it is, but we have been working with Phil Brown and Susan Kinnear about an ARC training hub in big data and agriculture. So essentially the data science group would form the nucleus of SET's part of that. And I think the goal would be to, as part of this application, is to recruit in a senior researcher to you know, really add some power to this group. We did actually get a level E in 2019 as part of the investment, the Vice Chancellor's scheme to do targeted recruiting. We all know what happened with that in 2020. But anyway, so we may have another shot at doing that at some point. But anyway, great work. And I'll be in touch about that research group plan as well.
Thanks.
And I guess Marilyn, I was just going to say, Marilyn, too, is that I think cybersecurity, Internet of Things, networking is, I think we need to start talking with people, see if we can get a critical, because we need a critical mass. I think you need at least 5 or 6 people that are truly active that will start writing papers together and things like that. But if we can get that going, then I think that's the next group we should focus on.
That was similar to my question, which was going to be, how do we go about joining these groups? I mean, we've got them. So data science is in Melbourne, but surely we can have membership from anywhere.
Oh yeah. And the reason it was primarily Melbourne was that this was in response to all the new hires for the master's programs that wanted to do research, but they're down on the metro campuses. You know, a lot of them would never have been to Rockhampton or regional Queensland. So, and that's how this started. But that's why I was asking that question about expanding. I think that but we got to do it in a sort of structured way, because you know how these things work. Everyone, once a program starts having a bit of success, everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon, but you know, it doesn't help to have all these people just jump on that think, oh, I just want to be on the papers or whatever. Like, we need people that are genuinely, you know, going to do active research. So I guess the easiest answer to that is just either contact me or Santoso, I guess. We don't have any sort of structures I wrote a sort of guidelines about these research groups, but we're going to bring that up at the next research advisory committee to discuss that. But it's nothing set in stone, but it's more just setting out the general how we would like it to be done from the leadership side of things. So it's still, it still is just talk to me.
Okay, another question. Anything for regional Queensland along those lines? And I'm not talking about Bundaberg, which is the future farming. I'm talking about perhaps Cairns or Townsville. Anything that from there, because
these groups certainly are not meant to be sort of based around geography. So for example, for the microgrids group, there's nobody from Rockhampton, but there's people from Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Gladstone, I think Bundaberg, I'm not sure, I think Bundaberg. So that's much more of a regional one, probably because the topic area, I guess, regional Queensland is where a lot of the action is happening in microgrids. But so even though the data science group, just because of the genesis of it from, basically tapping into that pool of metro-based ICT staff, it's certainly not meant to. In fact, I think it would strengthen it to have people from the regions, because the regions is where a lot of the work they're doing now on the livestock and the cropping is all regional Queensland. There's nothing south of the border. So.
I just wanted to add something on Marilyn's question. We have Rahat working with us on few projects, and he's from Rockhampton.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not restricted to Melbourne only.
Thanks, Nahina.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Any further questions? Are we going to do the unprecedented thing and start the next session early? I see Michael Cowling's here, but I don't see Christine Hanley as yet.
Knowing all the deadlines they've got, she'll probably come in at 1:29 and 59 seconds.
Yes, Steve Hall.
Marion, if we have a few minutes, the title of this session also covered mentoring of colleagues.
That's true.
Can we broaden out on that a little bit in the discussion, please?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think where that comes in is I essentially, the data science group came out of a sort of mentoring effort from me. And I think what's really good now is that, for example, Nahina, who's at ECR, now, hi Christine, Nahina is taken over. She is like mentoring a lot of the newer members of the group. So I guess these research groupings is sort of, well, I guess I'll play the mentor in terms of, because, for example, a microgrids group, Peter Wolfs obviously was the mentor in that group, and he's gone, but he's as an adjunct, he is still providing some mentorship. But in quite a few of these groups, and I think cybersecurity and IoT will be similar, we don't have any level Ds or Es or many, we don't have any senior experienced research staff. So mentorship is going to be part of that whole process. I can't provide the discipline expertise type mentorship, but I can mentor about how to engage with industry, how to write grants, how to write quality publications, which is essentially what's been happening with the data science group. But now that's sort of essentially a self-running autonomous unit. So that's great. I guess, Steve, is there any more specific thoughts that you had on that?
No, but I open it up to the 38 participants.
Yeah.
You know, there may be some observations, comments, desire to see something happening. We can support that in any way.
One of our, in our course reference committee, one of our industry panel members suggested that idea of some mentoring from the industry partners can work with us in different ways. So that's another way. And it was in fact someone from IBM, Narayana. So he presented this morning, and as we saw, a professor or a former professor involved there. So maybe that's another source where we don't have the level Ds and level Es that we may want. And if we can get them from industry, it could be of value.
It's a worthwhile comment, Steve. Thanks. And again, you know, working with our course advisory committee people, I know that we have the word course in their title, but I'm sure they may be able to reach into some of their organisations to assist if we had some focused questions for them.
There have been an employee from IBM who has got lots of experience in robotics, and she has been happy to be a mentor for one of my PhD students. But when I approached research school, Susan has informed me that there should be a IP protection, some form or something to be signed. And then when I approached the IBM employee, they informed me they always provide mentoring to other university students, and they never go into a formal, you know, IP protection agreement, because they are doing it on their own personal, you know, contribution to the universities rather than a formal thing within their employment. So yeah, then I couldn't go further anywhere. So I don't know how we will get through this.
You should raise that with Steven Moore, because you know I've got my own view of that, and I'm being recorded, so I won't say what I'm thinking. You know, how we engage with university, and my comment around collaboration is being hard. We shouldn't be making it harder to get this expertise from industry. I would make that comment. And again, I would regard that, you know, pro bono mentoring from industry as not a public disclosure of research we're doing.
No.
And if they do take an interest in what we're doing, that can be explored further at that time.
Yeah, and also the other advantage is if they find that this is a good project and the student is performing, maybe we have an advantage in applying for a fellowship or something later on, because they know we can approach the management and the project is already visible to them.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mary, because I think universities have inflated ideas of the value of their IP. You know, compared to an IBM, where would we put our research efforts? Come on, let's keep things real.
Thanks, Steve. And any further questions? Just last round. Okay, then I see both Michael and Christine are here. So we'll be having this next session. It will be on applying for grants. Michael is the immediate past chair of the SALT Grants Committee, and Christine is looking after the external grants and others. So I don't know which way you've set this up, who goes first, but Michael or Christine, it's all in your hands.
It's me, Marilyn. I'm the one that's going first. I said to Christine, I'll talk about learning and teaching, and then she can take over the real research again, the big R research. So brace yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, 15 minutes of learning and teaching. Hold on to your desk, right? But then we'll get back to the research. But it is learning and teaching, research and development, right? So it is, that's why I'm here. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see my slides. I promise there are not that many slides because I do only have 15 minutes. But hopefully you can see those now. Can I get a thumbs up or something similar, a nod? There we go, saw Meena nod, awesome. So this is a little bit just briefly about the Learning and Teaching Research and Development Grant Program, the LTRD grant program, but people still call it the SALT grant program. SALT is Scholarship of Learning and Teaching. We only changed the name a little while ago. So the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching program is about you being a scholar. And I would argue, you might have seen me argue this in the past, that we're all scholars. It doesn't matter whether you're a researcher, research focused, balanced, teaching scholar, even teaching intensive, there is a small portion of your time, maybe not teaching intensive, there's a small portion of your time allocated to this process of the scholarship of learning and teaching. And now, you know, when you're a researcher, often that involves doing research and keeping up to date with your developments in your field and then applying them to your teaching in a passive way. But sometimes you'll find that you want to change your teaching, you want to modify your teaching practice, you want to make what you do in the classroom better, regardless of whether you're an ICT person like me, or an engineer, or an aviation person, or a maintenance management person. You're doing the work and you go, wow, wouldn't there be a better way to teach these mechanical engineering students a particular concept? And that's what the Learning and Teaching Research and Development Grant Program is all about. You've thought, this is something I want to do. I want to make my classroom practice better, but I'm working too hard and I need some time off. I need a little bit of teaching relief, a bit of marking relief. I need an RA to do some of the work for me. Some of the data analysis for me, or data collection for me, or maybe you need a specialized bit of equipment, although these days that's in our school, hopefully that's a school thing, but sometimes it's a very specialized bit of a little tiny bit of equipment that you need. And so you decide you're going to apply for this Learning and Teaching Research and Development Grant Program. Now, we call for grant applications in this program towards the beginning of the year, usually sort of February-ish, but it depends year by year. So just keep an eye out on the official grants list. And then basically what you're doing is you're proposing an 18-month research project to us. It used to be 12 months, but what we did is we added 6 months when we changed the name to give you a little bit more opportunity to provide impact for your work. So what we found is people were finishing the work, but we wanted to give them an opportunity maybe to go to a conference, to do some workshops with staff, to deliver something at one of Faye's learning and teaching conversation sessions, or at a transforming teaching session that LDI run. We wanted to give you a chance to have maximum impact. And so we expanded things out a little bit for you. And it does have to be a research project. So we do expect you to do some sort of research to find out something that we don't already know. If I had $1 for every grant that I'd knock back that was proposing really good, doing something awesome in the classroom, but not evaluating it, not doing any research on it, I wouldn't have to work for 6 months, right? It's common that we get those kinds of things, and it's awesome that you've got that idea, but it is a Learning and Teaching Research and Development grant. So we want you to make that pitch for doing some research. But we can help you with that. If that's not the kind of research you usually do, that's okay. Come and talk to somebody like me or Marlene or somebody else involved with the program, and we'll help you with that. You then go through a process of developing an EOI. We then approve the EOI or not, as the case may be, and then you go through a preliminary draft and a final proposal. And that whole process takes about a year. So you start the process in February, you put the EOI together with the intention that if you work through those 3 stages, you'll start your actual grant in usually sort of January of the following year. And you'll apply for ethics around the end of the year to make that happen. So that's the basics of the program. And to be eligible for the program, you've got to be a full or part-time continuing employee at CQU. You can have other associate or partner investigators. So we were talking about people in industry just before, or people in other institutions. They can certainly be part of your grant program, but only one person can be non-university staff member. But they could be an adjunct or something like that. That's fine. That constitutes a university staff member. And then we have to have a person that's never applied for a Learning and Teaching Research and Development grant. And this is our anti-professor clause to stop all the professors just applying for them again and again, right? If you're going to apply for it again and again, then we want you to bring on somebody that's not done a Learning and Teaching grant before. And then you need approval for it from your supervisor, from Marilyn or whoever it might be, to say that it's okay for you to do this work. And I would argue that you should go to them and say, this is great scholarship. And if I get this, this will satisfy that scholarship part of my job as an academic. And I'm sure you'll get approval. And then you need any financial approval for in-kind contributions. And then you need ethics approval, which again, we'll help you with. And in fact, we've got a SALT ethics lab coming up very, very soon, I think, which talks a little bit about how you might apply for ethics for scholarship of learning and teaching style grants. And then you need an expert team ultimately, and we see this often sometimes for people that have small teams or really, really big teams. We want to know what each person is actually contributing to your team. And so don't just pick 4 random people in your school, but actually pick somebody who's more education focused, somebody that's more of a discipline expert, somebody that might be able to help with the learning design, and tell us that in your grant application. A good team size we often see is sort of 4 or 5 people. That's roughly what we're interested in. And we will give you, for the grant, it's different every year, but last year's grant program was up to $12,000 to do this work. Of course, you've got to justify the work that you're doing, but it's a nice amount of money for you to pay for those RAs or a little bit of equipment or marking buyout or whatever it might be to make it possible for you to actually do this work. And then last but not least, ultimately, when you do this work, you do need to make an argument that this is something that the university needs you to do. So it needs to align with our strategic plan. There's a thing out there called the Learning and Teaching Framework. You should align with that Learning and Teaching Framework. And it's really useful if you target some Seeker University strength in retention or social innovation, or inclusion and accessibility is a big deal for us at the moment. And it needs to be something that's useful for the university, not just for the school. If I didn't have enough dollars from knocking back things that aren't research-based, the other reason I would often knock something back is if somebody said that it would only help engineering students in a particular unit or IT students in a particular unit. And then, Marilyn's going to grin at this, but we would often say, well, go back and ask your head of course or your head of college to fund this, or your DDLT to fund this. We want something that's generalizable to the uni. That doesn't mean that it's got to be something that works in engineering and in nursing and in education, but at least make an argument that even though you're doing it with the engineers, ultimately the things you'll find out will help engineers and nurses and people in technology and people that teach math or whatever suits. So it needs to have that transferability and that generalizability. But hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how things work. It is a really interesting process. Sometimes academics that are discipline workers find this one a little bit of a challenging process, but it can be very rewarding. And to me, it always starts with you going, I've got this awesome thing that I want to do with my classroom, awesome thing I want to know about my students, and I need some help to work through this. And of course, ultimately it does count as a grant. It's an internal grant, but it counts as a grant. And you should also be able to produce some publications out of that as well, and that makes Steve Moore smile when you come to the PRPD later in the year. So because ultimately you're doing research work. But as Marilyn said, I'm just the former grants chair. The current grants chair is actually Dr. Lisa Bricknell. So she's the chair of the LTRD grants panel this year. Unfortunately, she injured herself a little bit earlier in the year and is still recovering. So I'm kind of covering for her for the moment. Alternatively, if you talk to Cherie Roy, she's our scholarship and development coordinator in LDI. She has lots of great advice about these things. And of course, Marlene Page is our learning and teaching grants and awards officer. And if I don't know the answer to your question, and Lisa doesn't know the answer to your question, and Cherie doesn't know the answer, and Marlene will certainly know the answer to your question. I often refer people to her. But I do want to volunteer for all of you here. You are all School of Engineering and Tech staff. So I do want to volunteer that if you do have questions about the grant program, even if you've just got the beginnings of an idea and you want to start thinking about doing some of this work, come and have a chat to me. I was the chair for a couple of years, and I am more than happy to have a conversation with you about your learning and teaching research and development style ideas, and see whether I can help you work out how it might turn into a research and development grant, or even maybe just connect you to other staff that might work with you. I been at the university for a little while. And so I know a few of the staff around, and if you say, well, you need a learning designer, or we need somebody in education that has a bit more pedagogy experience, I might be able to help you with that too. But if you want to know more about the program, there's the long link down the bottom. I don't expect you to note that whole link down. It's easier to just go to StaffNet and search for learning and teaching research and development grants, and you'll get straight to that link. But that's about it. So it's 1:44. I didn't do too badly, did I? So I'm going to hand on over to Christine. Do we want to do questions now, Marilyn, or do we want to do them at the end? At the end,
At the end,
she said.
yep.
Yep. Awesome. So sorry about that. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks very much, Michael. That was right on time. So I'll try and be either right on time or a little bit quicker, so we've got some time at the end for questions. So thanks, everyone. My name's Christine Hanley. I'm the coordinator of the research grants team in the research division. So I was invited here today to talk to you about external research grant applications. Before I start talking about external research grants, I wanted to touch on the university's internal research grant applications that are available. So a lot of you may have heard of the internal grant scheme in the past that included things like the new staff research grants, merit grants, linkage pilot grants. So it's my understanding, because the internal grants don't sit under my team any longer, but it's my understanding that those grants have been discontinued for the time being and replaced with a single internal research grant, which I believe round one is in the process of being the outcomes are in the process of being finalised for round one. Round two should be released this week. So keep an eye on your emails. You should see a notification that round two of the internal research grant scheme is opening either this week or next week. The applications will remain open for 4 weeks. Now that grant scheme provides up to $15,000 in funding for either a pilot study or preliminary work that will lead to a larger research project that will be externally funded. So basically doing a smaller study with a view to then applying for a larger amount of funds from an external funding agency. The grant provides funding for research assistant salaries, teaching release, essential consumables, equipment, travel, dissemination. So if you're not already subscribed to the researchers Outlook email list, please make sure that you do that, because that's where a lot of our correspondence about internal research opportunities or even external research opportunities is circulated to that. So it's through the university's listserv. I would like to be able to tell you exactly how to do that. I'm sorry, I can't. So probably one of your admin people would be best placed to direct you on how to do that. But it should just be a matter of subscribing to the researchers list. Okay, so that's it for internal grants. I'll now talk about external grants. I have a short presentation that I'll share with you. So I'll share my screen now. If it's not working, please just wave your hands at me and I will try and get it right. But hopefully you're all seeing that now. Yep, thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay, so this is just a very short presentation on applying for external research grants. So most of you would be aware, research grant are categorised into 4 different categories. So category 1 is Australian competitive grants. So things that would typically come to mind are your Australian Research Council, ARC, or the National Health and Medical Research Council, NHMRC grants. So ARC grants and NHMRC grants are extremely competitive. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Category 2, so other public sector research income, so other government schemes and business enterprises not considered Cat 1. state and local governments, and research income from CRCs, which we're not a core participant of. Category 3, industry and other research income. And then category 4 is CRC research income. So in the past, universities used to focus very heavily on category 1 income, and there was almost a perception with some researchers that if it's not category 1, it's not important, it doesn't matter. That's certainly not the case anymore. I think the Vice President Research will tell you that all money is good money. So there's absolutely no discouraging against category 2 and category 3. And obviously being a regional university and being very much having our strength in applied research, category 2 and category 3 is where we do a lot of our work. So this is just a snapshot of some of the various funding agencies that we engage with. So you'll see there a really broad variety, whether it be in the health sector, agriculture, science, the hard sciences, engineering. There's a very broad range of funding opportunities out there. So category 1, I did mention I'd talk briefly about ARC and NHMRC. NHMRC, I would imagine, is not so relevant to this group, but ARC has the discovery program, which includes your projects, discovery projects, the DECRA, so the Discovery Early Career Researcher Award, Discovery Indigenous, Future Fellowships, and Australian Laureate Fellowship. The linkage program includes linkage projects, which is probably what you are most familiar with, and that's where there's an industry partner co-funding the project and as a very active project partner. ARC Centres of Excellence, Industrial Transformation Research Program, the Linkage Infrastructure Equipment and Facilities, and Special Research Initiatives. So ARC and NHMRC are highly competitive. The success rates of those grants are not high. It used to be the case that linkage grants were considered, around a 40% success rate. I think even that is down in the 20s now. So there's more and more people applying, and they're not increasing the bucket of funding that the ARC has to work with. So it's very, very competitive. It's very lengthy applications that are very involved. So essentially it's a lot of work for, a small chance of reward. But I think anyone that has an ARC or an NHMRC grant would argue that it is worth it. So in terms of the esteem and also in terms of the level of funding and the freedom that you're given with those grants. So current trend, as I said, there's a growing trend towards funding applied and priority-driven research that can demonstrate impact. So real-world impact, impacting communities. And that is an area that CQU really has a lot of strength. So how to identify research grant opportunities? Well, I think the first tip I would give is to subscribe to Research Professional or to set up an account with Research Professional. So CQU has a subscription there. So if you are interested in an account, it should just be a matter of going to the Research Professional site and requesting a login. If you have any problems, if you'd like to just send an email through to me at research-grants@CQU, and we can help you sort that out. So getting started with grant applications. So we always advise to start small. So don't, if you're an inexperienced at applying for grants or managing projects, don't go aiming for that $500,000 ARC grant. Start with a smaller grant, brush up on your project management skills and build from there. So start small, start early. We're also busy, so time is really a big factor in applying for grants. and making sure that you leave yourself adequate time to prepare. Making sure that you're funding ready, so that your project or your proposed project is actually at a stage that is ready to be funded. Reviewing the publicly available information, and that's not just the guidelines, but also information on the priority areas or the aims and goals of the funding organisation.